out. The pro version as well as the business version or expert version are well worth it. So check out LeafWire when you get a chance, and we will try to get Peter, who we just saw out in Vegas at the MJBiz show, on here and kind of tell everybody what's new after the fundraise. But without further ado, Mr. Hill, tell us what's going on with CBGA.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me on, and a further plug. I am a client of LeafWire, and I wouldn't go anywhere else. They are going to be a touchstone for this entire industry, and quite frankly, they get it. Peter particularly. I'm having lunch with him next Wednesday, so I'll make sure if he hasn't watched this that we make sure he knows your kind words. But they're spot on, and I think that's one of the reasons I did this. I'm a property tax lawyer. These hands have never touched an organic chemistry book, and they're never going to touch an organic chemistry book. But I'm from the generation that I think owes a debt to what happened. And by that, I mean the culture from, I call it the Jerry Garcia versus Richard Nixon culture. And because here's the facts. Number one, up until a couple of years ago, all of the olive acid and something called geranol pyrophosphate, which the plant secretes to protect its female flower. So it's a combination of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that is very powerful. 22 carbon, 32 hydrogen, 4 oxygen. That's a very complex molecule. But up until 2 years ago, all of that acid would convert into the neutral forms that we know as THC, CBD, CBN, CBC, or even for that matter, CBG. But the cultivars, and particularly high-grade hemp out of Longmont, Colorado, and Santa Fe Farms, which acquired them, they mapped the genome of the cannabis plant about 5 years ago and figured out the gene that was responsible for producing the enzymes that would convert the acids to their distillates. So, gentlemen, we are literally at the inception of the discovery of fire here, because we now can commercially produce the acid form of the molecule. And the reason that's so important is this. I don't know if your viewers can see it, but that's the molecular structure of CBG. The only reason I use a dirty t-shirt is my wife gave it to me for Christmas. And as a lawyer, I said, oh my God, it's got the identical molecular structure to our bliss switches in our brain, anandamide and 2-AG, which are the master regulators for pretty much every bodily function we have: sleep, mood, appetite, any type of inflammation. And the basic reason is that we live in a biological world where oxidative stress is a 24/7 phenomenon that we all deal with in our own ways. But particularly with sleep, if we don't get deep REM sleep, our brain's never gonna get a chance to clean out the body as it was meant to do. So when I saw the molecular structure of CBG and realized it was almost identical to anandamide, I knew I was onto something. But here's where it gets fun. The real actors in this play are what they call the carboxyl group, which is COOH, 1 carbon, 2 oxygens, and a hydrogen, all linked together. Because in the acid form, they exist. So CBGA is the emphasis on the A. Those acids are that molecule's there, but when it decarboxylates or internally, when we basically biosynthesize it, they disappear. Now think about it, gentlemen. If you've got a carbon and 2 oxygen inside every cell of your body, you know what they're doing? They're exploding and cleaning up that cell. And essentially what we found out is that the CBGA is an identical molecular structure to our bliss switches, except they are acid deprived. We couldn't, we're human beings. We don't produce acids, but like attracts like, and what is happening is that all of our receptors in our endocannabinoid immune system get ignited all at once. So it makes you sleep like a baby, think like a grown-up and act like a human being, which is why I'm so excited.
And it's all from hemp. Let's just clarify that, right? So you're legal under
Correct. Yeah. In fact, the irony is the cultivars were doing this in response to the 0.3 issue, if it is an issue. I think most of these are red herrings for cannabis. So the reason they were mapping the genome is to engineer, and again, we're not talking about GMOs, nothing like that, but they wanted to make sure that we were producing hemp plants that remained hemp plants and didn't go, quote, hot. So on my farm, Healing Hollows farm, we grow Matterhorn and Ellie Rays, and both of them were genetically engineered by High Grade Hemp and Santa Fe Farms to ensure that my plants never would violate the federal standard for THC. But I think one of the unintended consequences, Kurt, was that they didn't realize they were making commercially viable the acid form of the molecule, or as James Carville would say, it's the acid, stupid, which I remind myself of every day. So
how have you commercialized this? You've got product out in the market?
Some, yeah. We have a website, liferesearchco.com. We've had problems, as you guys already know. The credit card processors, they basically tuck everything under the THC tent, and they don't allow you to even quote the science. So I can't make any claims. So
Robert,
so we're on market. We're
Robert, I'm going to tell you a little secret, but you got to keep it on the down low. All right.
I'll try.
Next Friday, everything goes according to plan. We've got a show that will solve that problem for you, but don't tell anybody.
I won't. I promise not to, but I'll be watching. And basically, if you haven't seen my LinkedIn site yet, the chances of me not telling anybody, David, are slim to none, and Slim left town. So,
okay.
But that's the whole point, is we just want to get on a level playing field. The reason I'm so enthusiastic about CBGA is that it literally, everybody we've given it to or sold it to, and this includes a psychologist in the Roaring Fork Valley, north of Aspen, who treats pro athletes and an NBA owner, all of whom are sleeping like babies now. I have, nobody in the society is getting good sleep these days. I think Gallup or one of the pollsters basically said that the number of Americans willing to admit that they're sleep deprived or have some type of sleep disorder has gone from 15% to 50% because of COVID and all the rest. Oh. So the number one thing this will do is it prevents the reuptake of dopamine at 2 a.m. So, and that's what, it's a master switch regulator. So it knows that if my cells and in my gut are saying, I'm out of energy here, I'm out of food. Well, what happens is the brain will typically send a huge shot of adrenaline and cortisol, and then we wake up, and you guys already know what happens then. What the CBGA does is because what happens is the cortisol and the adrenaline basically send a signal to the brain, get rid of that dopamine and start helping us now. And what CBGA does, like the traffic cop on 5th Avenue in Manhattan says, sorry, Bob needs to sleep for 4 more hours. We'll work this out without him. Because I have women and men that are telling me now they've slept better than they've slept in decades, including my 85-year-old mother, who I basically, and David, don't tell anybody this, but I basically become a heroin dealer to my mother. She will kill me if I don't give her our life research Rosin.
Well, we'll have you send some up to us, and Kurt and I'll test it, and we'll be able to.
And that's the acid test, literally and figuratively. I look forward to that, actually, because here's the deal: the chances of a property tax lawyer on this show talking smack about biochemistry and having biochemists in Canada, just they asked me to come to their conference last month, and that was laughable, but I had the best time and gave them an education. Because what my job is as a lawyer is to gather the evidence and present it as compellingly as I can. And what we are on, literally the new medicine movement cornerstone is going to be CBGA, because none of us have an immune system that's been fully activated before, because prior to this, there was not a compound that was identical to the bliss switch molecules, our endocannabinoids that regulate our systems anyway. That's why I'm so enthusiastic, is because there's not a single person that I've given this to that doesn't come back with glowing results. And regardless of the economics of it right now, which are totally upside down, this has got to be done, and it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done by us.
So, Robert, tell us a little bit about the economics. When you say the economics are upside down, we are obviously a business talk show about cannabis. Walk us through like the economic side of what you're doing.
Well, again, sometimes I feel like a Cro-Magnon at the discovery of fire. So now I know the recipe for fires, but nobody knows what fire is yet or how to create it. The acid form of the cannabis or the hemp plant has never before been commercially viable. So researchers, the Israelis and the Japanese discovered the endocannabinoid immune system and that CBGA fully activates it 20 years ago. And yet the industry has been asleep at the switch literally and figuratively for 20 years. And nobody's at fault. It's that we didn't have a commercially viable plant. We do now, several of them, and I suspect there'll be hundreds within 5 years. So CBDA, THCA, CBNA even. So the acid form and the varin acid form are where the action is, because those are the secretions that the immune system of the plant is secreting to protect itself. And that plant's been around us for 660 million years. But problem one is we're literally starting at ground zero, David. Nobody knows what the acid form can do because, quite frankly, no research has been done up until now. That's number one. Number two, this industry is populated by folks that like to monetize the molecule. And by that, I mean they want to blow it up. They want to blow this up and just grab a portion of it. CBD being and THC being the two best examples. There's nothing wrong with that, but they are distillates that will not be recognized by the body the same way that the mother molecule will be. So the second thing is that most folks in this industry are so competitive that they're overlooking the fact that if they laid out a CBGA line, all of what they're selling right now would become far more bioavailable and quite frankly, their profits. The one thing I know about our stuff is once you take our stuff, you'll never go back to the distillates. You just won't, because the effect is so profound versus what the distillates do to us. And I think the third reason, David, is just simple. It's going to take 5 to 10 years for the research to get done till we have clinical research that verifies everything that the preclinical research has already verified. If you go on liferesearchco.com, Life blog page, I made it my mission to publish articles on cause and effect on everything from arthritis to autism for kids. And it's going to be an education. That's why I figure I'm 63 and my job is going to be to try to educate people as best I can and ignite the real, the heavy hitters in the industry to say, CBGA shouldn't be in competition with anything, and Life Research will partner with anybody as a white label or anyway, because bottom line is, once we get the message out that this is the cornerstone of the endocannabinoid system itself, it's not going to take people long to realize they need it.
Actually, that leads me right to that question I was about to ask you. With the consumer seeing so much about hemp-derived delta THC, so we just put an article up on cannabis.net. What are these things? 8, 9, 10 THCO. Yeah. How do you distinguish and get that message out about CBGA being, I know the other ones sound sexy, but this is the mother molecule. Yeah. And you're saying it's for sleep. Sleep is going to be the selling point.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kurt. In our ebook, if people will get our ebook, they'll see a graphic where we put CBGA in the middle and we show which portions of the mother molecule everything else uses. So as we're having this debate about the effects of Delta 8 or Delta 9, it's like saying that I'm more interested in the 2-year-old than I am the adult. And because they all are what happens, and actually it's happens twice, but here's the selling point. In order for any of the distillates, CBD, THC, CBN, which is going to be really great for sleep, very sedative, in order for them to activate our immune system at all, they have to become acids again. So I'm not kidding about the carval thing. So what our stuff does is it promotes that process. Thus, when we say they're more bioavailable, what we're really saying is now we have a compound that'll interact with them and create their acidic condition again so that our body can use it. The irony of this, and this is where God comes in, the Hindus and the Chinese have called it the God plant for thousands of years. Or as I like to say, just because we Americans didn't invent it, doesn't make it real. Because I think the real issue is good old American exceptionalism, like Peter Vogel's of the world. That's what's going to make the difference. We got to get serious people from researchers on down. I get emails from pharmacists in Bangkok and in Sydney saying, go boy, go. Finally, somebody is promoting the obvious. Well, it isn't so obvious to us consumers because we're supposed to trust in what we get. And especially in this industry, like you said, with Delta 8, we're having these false debates because here's the fun fact. CBGA modulates our entire systems. So one of the things it does is it negates the ill effects of THC. So if you're a medical marijuana user, but you're concerned that over time you've noticed that you're getting accumulation and side effects, this will even regulate that. Here's the way I like to put it, guys. We think of ourselves as integrated human beings living a celestial life here on Earth. The truth is we're 1.5 pounds of minerals with electrons going through them. Our stuff allows those electrons to function at their best at all times. And as I say, that's why any form of oxidative stress inflammation will go bye-bye if you take CBGA and combine it with mushrooms, essential oils, THC if you need it, CBN if you need it. The point is, this is the mother molecule for a reason. She takes care of her children.
Right.
Last question, Robert. I think we're about out of time. If you make it big and we do a movie, can Sir Anthony Hopkins play you? Because it's uncanny.
I'm holding out for Jeff Bridges because I had a dream the other night that God empowered the dude to walk the earth and make sure that we get this right. Or he picks us up and drops us into the Andromeda strain where we pop like a cosmic zit. So yeah.
Appreciate your time. Go ahead, David.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great day. Keep going, guys. This is very important what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, listen, it's 4:20. We're going to take our 4:20 break. Don't go away. We'll be right back on the Green Rush. And we have got a phenomenal guest for today's show.
I'd forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the W.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us. This is David Rabinovich, your host. We've got another great episode. So now I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. We have a special guest today that we're going to devote the whole episode to, and that's Deana Martin. If you don't know Deana Martin, you may have heard of her in the news back in 2018. Deana was running the largest marijuana home delivery operator, definitely in Massachusetts, if not the East Coast, and maybe even nationally. They became very successful, unlicensed. The feds came in, arrested everybody. Deana had to plead guilty this year and accept a federal prison sentence. And there's been a lot written about her in the paper. I know her son, so I had kind of a little bit of an inkling of what was going on. I met Deana a few years ago, and when I heard that she had pled out and what the sentence was, we reached out because we think this is a great story. It touches a lot upon what's going on in cannabis, the heavy hand of the law, people trying to do the right thing. And if you read any of the media coverage, it paints her many ways in just in a demonized way. And there's other pieces of this story that we wanted to get out. We've got a couple other guests with us. We had Steve Mandile. If you're in Massachusetts, then you know Steve. Steve's a war veteran, also very much a cannabis advocate. And then we've got Zack Huffman. Zack's going to tell us a little bit to just get started about the newsletter he writes for. I believe they're out of the Midwest. They've just started an edition focused on the New England markets. They're doing a great job. I happen to come across it because my name got mentioned in one of their articles just inadvertently. And I reached out to Zack, and I thought it'd be great to have him join us. So we're going to start quickly with Zack to tell us a little bit about his article, and then we're going to jump right into it with Deana. Zack, tell us about the newsletter.
Sure. So it's grown in, and you'll have to forgive me. My sound levels are all screwed up. Do I sound okay?
You sound fine.
Excellent. I have new equipment I'm dealing with, but yeah. So grown in, it's a cannabis industry newsletter, just like David said, and it started about 2 years ago out of the Midwest. So at that point, it's covering, in the Midwest, we're covering Illinois, Michigan, Missouri. We just started covering Ohio. And then about 2 months ago, we expanded and started the New England newsletter, which is where that's when they brought me on board, because I'm already a New England guy. I actually live in Randolph, Massachusetts. And so I'm just, last 2 months, just kind of figuring out the beat. I've written a little bit about cannabis here and there, but now that I'm, doing the newsletter, it's kind of a crash course in all 6 states in this part of the country.
You're on mute, David. I'll tell you first, Zach, that all you got to do is drop Rabinovitz's name in an article. It's like Syndication Central, Google News, Flipboard. just keep doing that. Drop some names.
All right.
Yeah, no, he reached out to me and he's like, we got to talk. And I'm just like, oh man, what did I do wrong?
Yeah. Really.
So, and Omar just joined us. Omar is the local reporter for MJBiz. So we've got it. Like I said, we got a great cast. Steve, before we jump in, anything you want to add in, or you want to wait till we want to pull your opinions?
I'm going to wait for my turn. This is great. I want to jump right into Deana's
Great.
story.
And Bill Downing just joined us. If you are in Massachusetts, then you know the name Bill Downing. Bill Downing is one of the longest standing advocates in the state, one of the founding members of the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition, and somebody who's been arrested many times trying to get us to where we are today, which is legalized weed. But before we start to get into some of this, we're going to go to Deana. Deana, just give us a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about where you were in life a year before you got into Northern Herb and what actually got you there.
All right, well, let's see. As you know, my name is Deana Martin, mother of 4. I have 4, my children are all grown, ranging in age from 23 to 33. A year before I started Northern Herb, my husband and I were operating a bakery, restaurant, catering business out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, after having moved it from Boston. And the companies weren't doing well. They were circling the drain. We had been in business for a long time, had many years of great success, but had lost a major retail client and were struggling to keep our heads above water financially. When Massachusetts first passed medical, I approached my husband and said, this might be a business we might want to think about transitioning into. At that point, my kids were much younger. My older were teens. My younger were sort of, late middle school, and he wanted no part of it. He said, no, I don't want to send that message to our kids. So I said, all right, we were very much partners in business. And I said, no, if you say no, then no, it is. A year later, my third child is my youngest son, is a very competitive wrestler, got a concussion, and then he got another concussion. And after the second concussion, the symptoms were just unmanageable. I mean, he was just unrecognizable, behaviorally, emotionally. It was devastating. Yeah, there was a suicide attempt. And at that point, I was desperate. I'm just desperate to figure out how I could help him. Now, Bill factors very large into my early days, because he, as the founder of Yankee Caregivers, he was the first supplier. He did what I did before I did it. And he was the supplier to my sister, who, with Bill's help, was able to wean off of an opioid addiction. And that opioid addiction had estranged my sister and I. As a matter of fact, I had threatened to take custody of her daughter away if she didn't straighten out her act. So she turned to Bill, and Bill helped my sister transition from, I think it was somewhere between 10 and 20 prescriptions to 2. To this day, my sister is doing well. And in the context of what was happening with my son, my sister urged me to reach out to Bill to see if there was anything that he might be able to do for Keith. And he did. I went to CBD Please. I still remember it. He gave me gave me 10 vials of oil. And, at the time my son was 18, and I gave him the option of trying it or not, because, he's an adult and I didn't want to force him to do anything. He was old enough to make his own decision. He opted to try it. Within 48 hours, the headaches, the sleeplessness, the sensitivity to light, the mood swings were all gone. All gone. It was as if the clouds parted and the angels sung, and my son was smiling again. And that was the beginning. That moment was literally the beginning for me.
Go ahead. Sorry. Your story, and we've come to the point where you've accepted a plea deal with the government. First of all, how are you doing? The stress, the anxiety of the last couple of years, how are you doing right now today? How do you feel? Relieved, happy, pissed? Like, where are you at right now?
Right now, I'm acceptant, I guess is the best word for it. I mean, I've been living with this for 3.5 years. You can't be in fear forever. Once something scares you once, it cannot scare you again. And I'm past the point of being afraid of this. It's just time, I'm very happy to see, Stephen represented here because, at the moment, I'm actually being considered for the White House's clemency program. Weldon Angelos, who is, the activist behind Mission Green, has selected me as one of the first clemency applicants that they're going to be submitting to the White House before the end of the year. So in context of that, I have had to go out to, my sort of community and ask for letters of support. And what I did was I reached out to a young man by the name of Eric, who was one of the first veterans that I had the pleasure of working with. He maintains a good friendship with Nathan, and he and I talk. I was there when his mom passed away. We still maintain a relationship, and I asked him to write a clemency letter. And when I read that letter, he basically said if it weren't for me and for Northern Herb, he wouldn't be here. So how can I look at 2 years of my life and say that it's not worth the rest of his? He's 30 years old. So, do I want to be away from my family? No. Do I want to put my life on hold? No. Do I want to eat beans? No, I don't. I don't want to, take showers with 40 other women. No, I don't want to do that. But I don't want Eric to be dead or anybody else who might have been dealing with a life-death situation that cannabis helped them through. So I'd be lying if I said that the price I pay isn't worth it. It is, it's worth it. So how hard can I really complain?
And just so the viewers know, you accepted 4 years and you think it'll be around 2?
Yeah, yes, there have been some programs that I was accepted to, and then with Good Time and the First Step Act, most likely that the serve time would be 2. It's really not the judge or the prosecutor who decide how much time I spend behind bars. It's the Bureau of Prisons. And with COVID, and considering that I'm 53, I'm also represented by Wendy Gollenbach of the Justice League, who's working toward, toward mitigating my sentence as best as is reasonable. I believe it would be 2 years. And of course, that's presuming I'm not awarded clemency. I'm one of 12 applicants being brought to the White House before the end of the year, the only woman. So do I have a chance? Yeah. Is it a big chance? No, but it is a chance. And then there's also the possibility that legalization in some form happens before the end of my sentence, in which case expungement is a major component of all the major pieces of legislation being considered at the federal level. So the chances that I would be considered for some form of resentencing, I think, are pretty high. So I hang on to hope there. But the reality is that, how fast did COVID go by for all of us? How long was that? 18 months, 2 years? You look back, it may have seemed like a long time at the moment, but time flies. It's fast when it's behind you. It's a long time when it's in front of you. And at some point, this will be behind me. And I'm sort of determined at this point that, if it's going to happen, I don't have any control over this. It's not an eventuality. It's a reality. So I have to make the best of it. And, there are people out there who have suffered for the same sacrifice in a much more profound way than I'm being asked to. So, for example, Weldon was unfortunately sentenced to 55 years on a mandatory minimum for 3 very relatively minor cannabis offenses that involved a weapon. The judge actually resigned because his sentence was so egregious. He spent 13 years in prison. And he didn't know until he was pardoned by Obama that he was going to be pardoned. So imagine living with that weight as a young man, the weight of 55 years. So really, I'm okay. And I will be okay.
I tell people if people are pulling up your name now and Googling it, it seems like a lot of the stories written, Massachusetts they really stressed the payroll tax, the income tax, much more than the marijuana seems to come at the very end of every story.
Yeah,
I gotta call you like the Al Capone, like they're getting you on using the mailbox.
Yeah, no.
How do you feel?
I get
like
that.
How much was marijuana? How much was income tax and payroll tax evasion?
Well, it was 1 tax charge, 3 money laundering charges, 2 marijuana charges. And don't forget, the marijuana charges are under Schedule 1. So the mins are on the marijuana charge. If it was just the tax charge, I might get a year and a day, or I might get probation. But, I think that, and during my sentencing, the prosecutor made the point that they consider this to be much more of a tax case than a marijuana case. I can't speak for them as to why they would say that, except that there are 2 things that accomplishes. First, it makes me a bad guy to you. Whether you, the average individual, uses marijuana or not, when you make me out to be a tax cheat, you make it out that I'm stealing from you. So that's easier to make me a bad guy that way. Because if you can go to a dispensary now and you can buy marijuana, that's not the boogeyman anymore. The boogeyman is the one that you fear. And the one that you fear is what takes away from you, what you think you're owed. So that accomplished that. But it also allows them to really slap me with all kinds of fines. And should marijuana become legal, the money laundering charges fall, the Schedule 1 charges fall, the tax charge does not fall. So that allows them to maintain the snare around my ankle. And I really believe that that's what's behind it. Now, I don't disrespect the judge. I don't disrespect the prosecutor. They had jobs to do. I gave them a job to do by being in a place doing something I really shouldn't have been doing, except that that's not the whole story. How do you pay payroll taxes on an illegal business? How do you do that without committing more crimes, right? So now I pay payroll taxes, and I'm pretending to the government to be an entity that I'm not. And now you're talking about more money laundering charges. Now you're talking about identity theft. And for example, when we use PO boxes, and I had people offering to give me identities. Oh, Deana, don't take those PO boxes out in your own name. You're just leading them to you. I will get you fake IDs. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what I need to be charged with an identity theft charge for every PO box I open. There's a difference between doing what you need to do to accomplish your mission and then being completely evasive. I was not trying to be evasive. I did what I did right out in the open. And I didn't file payroll taxes because I'm going to file a 941 under a false corporation. That's another crime. And I didn't want to commit crimes I didn't feel I had to commit. Now, as far as the payroll, the income taxes were concerned, they seized my records. They seized all my records, my online records, my physical records. There was no way I had enough data or backup to file taxes, income taxes. So I didn't evade them. I just didn't file them, which is not the same. But when you're in a position where you're looking at a mandatory minimum of 11 to 12 years, and they say, well, we're going to add this charge to you, but you're going to have to waive your right to be indicted for that charge. But we're going to offer you less than half of the mandatory minimum. Are you going to say no? Do you want to sit in prison for an extra 6 years on a technicality? No. But the irony is that the very day that we were raided, that very day, I was sitting in a tax attorney's office, working to negotiate with what I owed the IRS, because the businesses that I own that failed left me with a significant tax debt. Not on me personally, but on my businesses. And once businesses fail, if you can't pay taxes, what happens is the government eventually assesses you personally. Those taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. They were going to follow me around for the rest of my life, which is probably 20% of what I hope to resolve with Northern Herb. So in other words, I had been saving money with the intent of, as I operated Northern Herb, with the intent of paying this debt off. Now, you can believe that or you cannot believe that. I'm telling you, that's the truth. That morning, I was sitting in an attorney in Quincy's office saying, I've got half of what I owe. Tell me what I need. I need you to take this, offer it to them, and let's create a payment arrangement for the balance. That's the truth. I literally went from that tax attorney's office to that office in Hyde Park that you've heard so much about. And that's when the raid happened. So I'm not the boogeyman. I'm not trying to steal money from any of you. And we're talking about FICA taxes, which is money that
Social Security.
It's Social Security, right? It's we're not talking about me, stashing millions of dollars in a safe.
Oh, you're stealing from the seniors, I see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Like that hasn't been made a cottage industry out of by the politicians. Sorry.
Yep.
So let me jump in for a minute. Steve, do you want to add do you have any insights or anything you might want to add to the discussion about what, Deana talked about the letter she had from the veteran Do you want to add anything in on that? And Bill, I want to give you an opportunity as well after Steve, and then we'll turn to Zack and Omar.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me on. Deana, you're a hero for what you did. There's, just like that veteran wrote that letter to you, that you helped save his life. Cannabis did the same thing for me. I had tried 57 different medications over a decade, and when I first started the cannabis, it was to get off of fentanyl, oxycodone, Xanax, Ambien, and a few different antidepressants. And, that's an issue that veterans are facing at a huge scale compared to the rest of society, with the injuries and stuff we have. But to make it so you have to literally sit down with a family and be like, all right, I want to get better. Are you okay with me breaking the law? Like it doesn't make any sense. And like you were saying, what they're coming after you for, it's based out of greed. It's based out of taxes. This is the biggest problems that the industry has in the state right now with HCAs and everything. It's not so much that people are afraid of cannabis. It's what are we going to get for it? Like, we want a piece of it. So it's solely based on greed. And I'm sorry you're having to deal with everything you're going through. And I really love your attitude of, because of the people you've helped, you do it again. And that says a huge amount about your incredible character. So thank you.
So Bill, how many times have you been arrested?
I actually have never been arrested.
Oh.
I think I'm the only person who's ever been swatted.
Right.
That's David Lyon at the bar all the time. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I got swatted in 2015, but they were unable to arrest me. And I was pulled into the arrest tent in the Freedom Rally at one point, but my attorney from the ACLU happened to be right next to me, and they decided not to arrest me.
Okay.
So anyway, I've been lucky in other ways. So I've spoken with Deana a couple of times, and yeah, she's facing some horrific penalty, in my opinion, a horrific penalty. Yeah, I was there with her from the very start, as far as she saw what we were doing at Yankee Caregivers and decided that that was something she was interested in. Now, what happened at Yankee Caregivers is we got a cease and desist order a long, long time ago. And I think that's the way.
Bill, from who? Who said what? From where?
From the Department of Public Health.
Okay.
Who was in charge of medical marijuana at that point in time. And I think that would have been a better way to handle this situation. I don't know what Deana's opinion about it would be, but I can tell you my opinion. It's an awful lot better to get a cease and desist order than it is to have a SWAT raid.
Would agree.
Yeah. And so why they didn't do that becomes a big question in my mind, especially when the people of Massachusetts were given 3 opportunities at 3 presidential elections to voice their opinion about how the state should handle marijuana. And all 3 times, the public told the state, cut it out. Stop the war on marijuana. Stop the war on marijuana users. And I was hoping at one point the state would actually get that message and that they would take it to heart. But here we have a situation with Deana where the state is still battling this war. And they didn't need all this information that they got from her. They already knew it was all open, as Deana said. They didn't need to do any investigation at all. All they needed to do was knock on her door, say, we know what you're doing, and you've got to stop. And the whole thing would have been taken care of. It would cost the government $0, and nobody would be suffering horrifically. And the problem, as far as the government would be concerned, would be solved. And why they don't do that in not only this situation, but in many, many other situations, well, I guess it's because they're used to being bullies and using cop toys and using cop kind of tactics of being semi-violent that makes them so happy. And I wish that they would change that attitude.
So I want to give Omar and Zack an opportunity. If Zack, you're unmuted, so I'm going to start with you. And I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you have a question for Deana, jump on in, and then I'm going to give the same to Omar before I toss it back to Kurt.
Yeah, sure. And I guess one thing I'm really fascinated with is kind of, how an operation like this kind of gets up off the ground? You know, like was it difficult finding access to cannabis? Kind of how did that work?
That was an education. I'll say that. I mean, I think that I probably applied more of what I had learned on the operating a commercial bakery than you would even think with regard to how it compares to marijuana. Of course, the difference is that when you're looking for flower, you got a variety of vendors, right? So I remember thinking, okay, well, you don't have, these, national corporations to go to buy your weed from. Maybe someday you will, but you don't. So you have to go out there and you've got to find them. So the supply issue became really what my focus was. And it kept me going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because I started with what I could get locally, and we had a small grow at the very, very beginning. But there was no way I was ever going to be able to keep up, because once we were the vendor of choice, it was literally a machine. Like, you sort of fed money in one end, it spit weed out the other end, and it kept on going. And I was a slave to it. So, I think people often like to say, oh, all that money the Fed said you made. I'm like, no, it wasn't like that. I didn't price my product to gouge customers. I didn't price it to run off and hide in Costa Rica and live there for the rest of my life. I priced it so that I could keep the machine running and save enough money to pay the debts I had. So my prices were low. But as far as the supply is concerned, just like anything, you start with a few relationships. Those relationships lead to other relationships. Some work out well, some don't. But by and large, I found myself doing business with people in California. And that's really where the federal trouble came in. It wasn't so much what I did within the state. It was the fact that I was bringing product in from California, and I was unabashed about it. I felt like Massachusetts customers had the right to the same quality and variety and breadth of products that was available in a state like California that was just a little more evolved than we were with regard to marijuana. So, I mean, I had cancer patients, I had veterans, I had people suffering from Lyme disease and fibromyalgia and anxiety, and I had deaf people, blind people, paraplegics, any manner of individual for whom, number one, going to a dispensary here would be difficult. Number two, or impossible. Number two would just needed access to something other than what they could get at a Massachusetts dispensary, or the fact that I think at the time Massachusetts dispensaries were limiting you to maybe an eighth or a quarter a day. So how are they going to do that? I had veterans who would use an eighth of an ounce a day. So what are they going to do? Go to a dispensary every other day and then pay that markup because they couldn't buy an ounce at a time. So by the time you're done, you're paying $450, $500 an ounce and spending 6 hours a week standing in line. And that was just wrong. And that was presuming that you didn't have the anxiety issues or the physical issues that would prevent you from going to the dispensary to begin with. So, it was a trip. I'll say that, because once we started really attaining the levels of volume that we got noticed. I mean, I went to LA and there would be, I think I said this on the news article that Channel 5 ran. Somebody pulled up and said, here's a Rolls Royce. There's a Rolls Royce for you for the week. Another week here, it's got a Maserati SUV for you for the week. I mean, I sat on the floor at an LA Clippers game next to Billy Crystal. I went to parties in the Hollywood Hills in $20 million houses, and, where there were movie producers and, sports stars, playing poker in the basement. I mean, it was wild. Not what I was after. Right, that's what the culture is out there when you start selling, you start buying $250, $500,000 a month worth of marijuana. Did that sway me? No. Did it make me think that I was any better, any worse than anyone else? No, because to me, it was the means to an end. But regardless of how big we got, the problem of supply never eased up. So I was always waiting the next package, always stressing whether or not what I was waiting for was going to get there in time, because people relied on me. And that's what Northern Herb was good at. So when you get back to your question of how did something like that get off the ground, we started with, I remember the first deliveries I did. I remember standing in front of my kitchen counter. It took me 3 hours to pack the first 3 orders. And I went out and delivered them myself, and they were all over the state. I got home at like midnight. So it started from there to, at the time that we were closed down, we did probably on average 150 orders a day on average. A really busy day was 250. On 420, we might do, 300 or more orders in a day. But I think that the brilliance behind Northern Herb was its simplicity. And, and I studied delivery businesses in California. I spent quite a bit of time taking a look at how those businesses operated. And and the decision that I made that I think largely impacted Northern Herb's success rate the most was we were not an on-demand delivery service. So in other words, you could not call me at 10 o'clock in the morning and say, I want an order in an hour. That made no sense to me. I'm like, marijuana is not pizza. It is not going to get cold. It's not going to get gummy. We are going to deliver between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. And if you can't wait until then go someplace who is willing to, be at your beck and call. We had to be disciplined about it. I was not going to send a driver out to Abington to have them come back and then to go back out to Holbrook. It made no sense to me. So as time went on, we built routes, and we got to the point where we had probably 7, 8, 9, 10 routes a day, and the driver went out from the hub and then turned around and came back, and it was incredibly efficient. The only thing that limited me was 1 supply and 2 drivers. And so I mean, I could have gone on indefinitely. I mean, the way that the growth happened was sort of the analogy I use is, do you remember watching Back to the Future, and they're in the train, right? And they throw those 3 logs in, and the log explodes, and the train just shoots forward. That's what it was. I couldn't ever tell you when that other log was going to explode, but you felt it coming. And I never really knew whether reputation, I never paid attention to what brought people to us. I just took care of my customers. So I never knew whether there was some article that was being written or there was some Reddit post that went viral, but all of a sudden it would be an explosion. Boom, the train would take off, and I would have to go back to my suppliers and pressure them. And that meant being awake all night, literally hitting refresh on tracking to make sure that something wasn't getting held up. Toward the end, I should have known something was happening. Packages were going missing in the mail. Packages were arriving partially empty, or boxes were arriving empty, which is a dead giveaway that we were being watched. But for me, I was like looking at it like I found an excuse for it all. I didn't ever want to believe that I was being looked at, that I was being investigated. Because I really just was so intent on, if you placed an order, you were waiting for it. The thought that someone was sitting in their bedroom or sleeping or trying to sleep and was like literally looking at their watch or looking at their phone, waiting for me or waiting for one of my drivers, I could not bear it. I could not bear the thought. So whatever it took, I did it. And so literally, I remember the day of the raid, sitting there, we were, all of us, there were 7 of us in the office sitting there while they were walking around and pulling the office apart. I remember hearing the phone ringing and being like, somebody's got to answer that. Somebody's got to answer that and tell them that we're not coming. And it was like, that was the worst part. And then, at some point you have to say, well, it's not my fight anymore. I can't. And that was the hardest thing, was not knowing what was going to happen, whether the customers were going to get what they needed, when they needed, how they needed it, for the fairest price they needed it, because I felt like they were family, annoying family, demanding family, unforgiving and unrepentant family at times, but they were my responsibility.
Omar, did you want to jump? I'm sorry, Zach.
Sure.
Zach, did you oh no, go ahead, Omar. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, thank you for having me on, and Deana, it's really an honor to be on the show because of you. And I want to echo,
you, Omar.
I want to echo some of the things that have been said. Mainly just the injustice of it all is just makes the jaw drop. And also, I'm just amazed by by your attitude, by the nobility of it. I was thinking as people were speaking that if you ever wanted to do a rebrand, you might want to consider Noble Herb, but that's just something that's for another time. But I'm with Marijuana Business Daily, and we're always curious about the business aspect of of what people are doing, and of course the licensing aspect. And I was curious, when you mentioned you had that sort of eureka moment when you said, okay, I'm going to get into this. Did you consider going the quote unquote, legal route, getting a license? And what was, if not, what dissuaded what dissuaded you from it? What made you go the route that you wanted to go? Or
well, initially it wasn't an option, right? Because there was no path early on when recreational passed, no immediate path that was going to allow delivery, at least not recreational delivery. There was some movement toward medical delivery, but it wasn't very well executed by anybody that was executing it. But to be quite honest, and I'm not sure that any article that's been written about me has addressed this, right, maybe about a year and a half in, I actually hired Valerio Romano. I gave him a retainer and I said, find me a host community, and I want to be first in line when they do make recreational delivery available. So I had reached out to real estate agents and was starting to look at towns that might consider us. So I knew that what I was doing wasn't sustainable, and that it wasn't even wise to try to, that eventually something was going to happen. And I had opportunities to buy into legal businesses on the West Coast, and actually was very, very close to purchasing a dispensary out in Portland, Oregon, till Portland's got its own issues with regard to how they execute their legalization program. Likewise in California, the week of the raid, we had started a delivery business in California called NHLA, Northern Herb LA. And I had hired a consultant out of there, a gentleman by the name of David Rice, and had been meeting with John Armstrong, who's the legalization attorney of choice out of California. So I had my fingers in to 3 markets to try to bring down a legal license somewhere, some way, somehow, figuring that if something went wrong in one state, that there might be some goodwill extended to me had it been known that it was my intent to become legal. Nobody cared. And to answer somebody else's question with regard to, why this happens and there isn't a cease and desist letter sent, because they can't steal money from you if they don't. They seized more money than I'm even being asked to pay, so the money that they seized would cover a good portion of the restitution that they're ordering me to pay. It probably would have covered even the payroll taxes, but that's not how it works. And the press coverage, to be quite frank, and again, I have no ill will toward the prosecutor in my case or the judge, because they were very civil and very kind. But the fact is that federal prosecutions are not based on public safety. They are based on months of incarceration. That is the currency with which a prosecutor's career is made. So the more months of incarceration they get, the more likely they are to be considered for a lead office. So in other words, as opposed to being an assistant U.S. attorney, they become U.S. attorneys. They transition into private practice. But that's the political capital. You've seen people like Bill Weld and Rudy Giuliani's lives, careers have been built on prosecutions.
Yeah. Deana, just to follow up on that, it's very intriguing about the whole licensing situation. It sounds like you made the effort, but just the wait would have been way too long. And given the people,
I was willing to wait. It wasn't that. The circumstances unfolded before. I was willing to pay whatever it took and do whatever it took. We were actively, looking at towns in California and Massachusetts. Had I been allowed to continue to operate, I would eventually have come down with a legal life.
Sure.
So we're at the, Omar, I'm just going to jump in for a second. We're at the top of the hour. This is a great conversation. We're going to keep it going. Stick with us. We're going to be right back. We need to take our break.
All right. Thank
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay. Easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Well, thanks for hanging with us. It was a very short break and frankly, I had to just kind of corral everybody because the conversation keeps going. This is a great show. This reminds me, Kurt, of the November 5th show we did with Professor Mikos. This great topic. But Omar, if you don't mind, ask the question again that you asked to Deana, and let's see if we can kind of rewind and repeat that so the audience can hear the answer.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I was curious about is that, if it's possible, would you consider trying to get a license again in the cannabis industry? I mean, is it possible? And if so, how could you go about it?
Well, I think it depends on how my sentence unfolds. And I was ordered to serve 3 years of supervised release once I'm actually out of prison, and you are not allowed to do anything that's federally illegal while you're on supervised release. So the best I could hope for would be that if I was a real good doobie for a year and a half, generally supervised releases will end in half the amount of time if you keep your nose clean. I do know other federal people who have formerly served time for federal marijuana cases who are currently in the marijuana business. So that option would be there. And to be honest, I don't see this unfolding in the way that I will have to serve this entire sentence. I am optimistic that there'll be some movement at the federal level before my sentence is fully served and I have to serve whatever length of time on probation. So the short answer is yes, I would. I loved the industry for a lot of reasons, and I would love an opportunity to get back to it. And there is the possibility that I would go back in a non-sales aspect. So in other words, I'd serve as a consultant or a writer or, some sort of an activist, in which case I'm not actually selling the product. I'm not doing something that's federally illegal, although that would be up to my probation officer, I guess, to see how he interpreted that. It takes a little bit of getting used to, my current, I'm on a pretrial, obviously a pre-report probation. So I report to a probation officer who's about half my age. And that's really, really interesting. He's a good kid though. But so the short answer is yes. I mean, I've learned a lot, and I think that there's a lot that I would offer the industry in terms of efficiency and effectiveness and how to build a market and how to keep a customer happy. Because I think that given that marijuana has sort of evolved from a black to a white market, I think that there's a lot of understanding of what a customer needs is lacking, because it's evolved from you'll get what you get when I give it to you, and you'll like it and you won't complain, because if you do, you're just going to have to find another plug. And I think some of that attitude still exists. Maybe it's because of what I said, it's just the way the market came, or maybe it's just because the choices are always so limited. A customer sort of has to take what they're given. But what Northern Herb was a pure free market test case, pure free market. And people were free to go anywhere they wanted. They came to us for a reason. And that was because our prices were fair, because we were consistent, we were reliable, and we were friendly. And we paid attention to what they wanted and what they didn't want. And if you bought weed that you did not like, I would take it back. I couldn't use it, but your experience was more important to me than your money. And I think that a lot, I can't speak for dispensaries as a whole. I don't have enough experience with them, but I think that by and large, dispensaries are not conditioned to to think about what's good for the customer. They're conditioned to think what's good for them. And I think that's just a mistake.
So I got a question I'm going to pose to Kurt, and then I'm going to jump away for a moment because I got to be on dog care for a second. But Kurt, if Deana goes away for, let's say, 2 years, what do you think the odds are when she gets out and ends up on probation, whether marijuana is still going to be illegal at the federal level?
Oh, 2 years, huh? I might pass that around the room, no pun intended, to the left, but I was going to ask her if she's selling weed to her probation officer yet, but she kept talking. So,
no.
2 years. I think she'll get out. Okay, here's what I predict. And by the way, the ending of the Clemency, Reese Witherspoon with the dark hair coming out of the White House to end the movie. That's a goal. Let's do that. Let's get that done.
Okay.
I think 2 years. Yeah. I think within 2 years we'll have federal something, Safe Banking Act, decriminalization. I'm not going to say full on legalization, but let's see what everybody else thinks.
Omar, what do you think?
I'm not on mute. Good. Boy,
exactly.
This way. I heard somebody say the other day, very recently, a DC attorney who follows this, they were looking at more like 6 years. And I'd have to say it might be, that's my thought. It might, I think the federal government moves very slowly, and I think it's gonna be closer to 6 than to 2 in any case.
They don't get marijuana legalized at the federal level.
I'm sorry, I wish it weren't.
Yeah, that was one down vote. Okay, who's next?
So if they don't get it decriminalized or legalized in the next couple of years, what do you think that's going to do to the Democrats' chance of holding the White House? Do you think it's going to even be material at all?
Well, that's a good distinction. Decriminalization, I can see that actually happening a lot sooner. I can see decriminalization happening 2 years or maybe even sooner.
With safe banking,
quite frankly, but like a tax and sell industry. That's tough. That's tough to say. But a lot of people, not to digress too much, but how much do we want the federal government involved? Do we want the federal government just to leave it up to the states, to sort of do their own? But yeah, that's it. But yeah, decriminalization, I think, will happen a lot sooner than the sort of a tax and regulate situation.
Bill, do you have a thought on that? Care to weigh in?
Well, my only thought is it just seems to take forever for governments to do things. One of the reasons why I think one of the reasons why Deana got involved in this business was because when medical marijuana was passed here in Massachusetts, the state government dragged its feet horrifically, and people suffered terribly because of it. And that's gone on a lot. This state takes pride in the fact that it has very restrictive marijuana laws and very restrictive medical marijuana laws. And I think the federal government would take pride in being restrictive at those things as well, unfortunately. But there's the movement of the people, and that's independent of the government. And regardless of whether the government's responsive to the opinions of the people are changing rapidly on this subject. And more people are in support of the availability of marijuana all the time. So it's going to build pressure. It's like pressure behind anything. And once it gains enough momentum, the government will have to respond.
Kurt, you have any other questions before I jump in with another big question for Deana or Stephen? Looks like you want to jump in. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I think legalization will happen within 2 years, but I don't think it'll be rolled out for quite a bit longer because we had legalization here, and it took quite a bit to get rolled out. One of the things I'd like to know, Deana, is are you now subject to testing? Are you not allowed to use any cannabis now?
Well, you may be surprised to hear this. I never used it.
Okay.
I try, as a matter of fact, at the moment I tried Northern Herb. I opened Northern Herb. I had never tried marijuana. I've been drunk. I could count on one hand the number of times I've been drunk. I'm just a teetotaler. I just don't know how to put it. I always thought not marijuana, but alcohol tasted like poison. And I just was never interested in it, but I didn't judge the people who did use it. I mean, obviously I raised teenagers.
Yep.
And the irony is that my older two boys, Nathan and Stefan, nicknamed me Dragon Lady because, and that's where my nickname came from, because one of them, Stefan, had a dragon pipe and he left it in my car. And I pulled it out one night when I was like, what the heck is this? And I threw it out the window. So that was it. It was probably $100 pipe going back to when he's 30 now. But so, I was never, I never used it. I tried it. My older boy was like, Mom, if you're going to sell it, you have to try it. I tried it a few times. I tried trying sour diesel and being like, yeah, no, this isn't fun. And one time I took
whoa. We got ready to keep it going.
I've got a better story though, because I had an earache once and someone gave me we were selling these oil capsules, these just beautiful 50 milligram oil capsules. And one of my kids said, well, Mom, if you're going to sell this stuff as a medical, response and you've got an earache, you need to take one and see what happens. I said, well, what if something happens? Like, what could happen? It's weed. So I took it. I fell asleep. I woke up a couple of hours later and I swear every cell in my body was humming. I just laid there and I was like, if you move even an inch, you're going to puke. If you just move an inch. And I was like, oh, forget it. I rolled over on my knees and I projectile vomited for a good hour. And then that was the sort of, how they test you with pepper spray, they spray you in the face. So you know how it feels like. So that was it. So after that, anybody who I worried was going to overuse, I'd be like, I got a story for you. Start low and slow. You don't want to do what I did. So no, I was not an issue with my probation officer.
Got it.
You're not selling them sour diesel, but
no, I am not selling him anything. Nope.
All right, so I have to ask you, because you did see the article I wrote about weed maps and how their revenues are off because they had to remove illegal sellers from actually the US and Canada.
Yeah.
You were an illegal seller, very familiar with weed maps. You've dealt with them. Your computers that were confiscated had records and a lot of things about weed maps. What was it like being an illegal seller on weed maps?
Okay. Well, I have two experiences with weed maps. There was the one in Massachusetts, because if you'll remember, there was a time where Leafly also, weed maps, Leafly, and Allbud all allowed you to advertise as an illegal seller. Leafly pulled the plug first. And then once they pulled the plug, everybody went to weed maps. Now, weed maps was not a great option if you were on the East Coast. Weed Maps is a West Coast company. But they, for a period of time, allowed it. And then once they did for a little while, they got a letter from the state of Massachusetts and they bagged out, and they tried to keep us going by listing us in Rhode Island until Rhode Island got wise and forced them out of Rhode Island as well. So that I had that, issue with Leafly and Weed Maps. Now, when we started Northern Herb LA, 2018, we went back to Weed Maps because they were they're the players in Southern California. And it was very much like it was exactly the way your article says. If you want to be on their list, you're buying places and they're tens of thousands of dollars a month. And it's really like, it's a mafia. It was a mafia. If you didn't pay, they were going to yank your listing. They were going to give it to someone else. And they took cash. I remember being there seeing people show up with backpacks full of cash to pay their monthly fees. And if that wasn't an option, or for whatever reason you couldn't, or I think at the time we were dealing with them, they had been cautioned not to accept cash. There was too much cash going into their bank account. So they counseled us in particular to buy cash cards. So you would go to 10 different CVS's, buy $500 Visa gift cards. And then you would go and you would bring them, if your monthly bill was $10,000, whatever it was, you're bringing them $2,500 gift cards and they're processing them. That's how they instructed you to pay your bill. Now, we didn't do it for very long, obviously, because we were shut down in LA at the same moment we were shut down here in Massachusetts. But it was highly illegal what was going on over there, highly illegal. And we knew exactly what was happening. The legal businesses were allowed to advertise. They had storefronts. They could attract their customers however way they wanted. Illegal businesses didn't have that. So they had no alternative really, but to go onto these online sources. Now I will say, I don't know how they managed it, but Allbud was really what we what launched us, because All Bud, it was free. The listings were free. And, and you just needed to get some reviews. And for us, it wasn't that hard. I mean, we were the highest rated delivery service on All Bud for a good year and a half. And then eventually when things began to change at All Bud, and unfortunately, I don't remember exactly how or why they changed. I was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter anymore. We don't need it. By then we had a customer base of thousands and thousands of our own, and we took care of them. We took care of our customers. So I think I remember running some statistics off our program. We had a customer retention rate of 95%.
Oh, Kurt, you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, Laurie, looking back as you're starting kind of, I guess I'll call it the third phase of your journey with sentencing done. And what's one or two things, if you could do one thing differently and play God going back, what's one or two that pop right into head, blink reaction?
You mean
Yeah, like not the whole thing, but like, I wish I didn't go to California that last time.
Yeah, I probably, if I, there are a couple things that obviously I did wrong, which is what, I mean, I'm not, just to make it clear, I'm not trying to advise anybody who's doing what I did to break the law. Okay. I don't want to be advocating for breaking the law. So what I should not have done was brought product in from out of state. That's where the trouble was. Otherwise, I would have been in a cease and desist situation like Bill was. I should not have opened bank accounts in other companies' names. Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing was laundering money. I really just thought I was breaking banking rules. Now, innocent, ignorant, however you want to call it, that's what I did. Had I not done those things, I would not be in federal trouble. I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm trying not to say is that I would, if I could have it do all over again, I would be a better criminal. That's not what I'm trying to say. Do you understand what I mean? Like, I want to make it clear that
we're sloppy, lady.
I made the decisions I made, and I accept responsibility for them. I just they seemed like a good idea at the time. I guess that's what it comes down to.
And pay your payroll taxes too.
Yeah, no, honest to God, the government, I mean, yes, I absolutely should have, except that I know what would have happened. I would have been charged with something else. I know I would have. Right. It would have been some other, bank fraud charge that I would have caught that had I done what they told me to do. So there was no way. There's no way to pay legal payroll tax on illegal business.
Yeah. So let's go backwards a little bit. So when did Keith have the episode with the wrestling that caused you to reach out to Bill Downing?
He got his first concussion. I'm trying to remember, February. It was at the state tournament in Milton, which is where we live. Actually, he got two concussions back to back, and that he was in his junior year, so that might have been 2014. And it was bad. I mean, he ended up having to repeat his junior year. As a matter of fact, we went, it was February vacation. I tried to make him go back to school. He couldn't function. He ended up missing almost the balance of that school year. And I went back to the school and said, when he did go back, the teachers were trying to force him to make up all the work, or they were going to, they were going to give him incompletes or bad grades. So in other words, if he didn't complete the work, rather than just grade him on the work that he did, they were going to average it out. He would have failed all of his classes. And I said, we're not talking about, just, a kid who doesn't care about his education. We're talking about a kid that really is, he's got a high GPA. He has a chance of going to a really good college. You're really just going to let it happen that way? I mean, he had your M on his chest when he wrestled out there. You forced me to take a concussion awareness class. Now my son's got a concussion. You're going to tell me that if he doesn't finish this work, he's not capable of finishing, that he's going to take bad grades? And they said, well, sure, you can explain that away in a college essay. I said, bullshit. You are not going to do that to my son. You are not going to railroad him. He fought for you. You need to fight for him. And they said, you know what? We're not going to let you labor under the illusion that we are going to allow your son to repeat his junior year. He will accept the grades as he gets them, and he will go on to his senior year. That's not our problem. And I said, well, fuck you. It is your problem. I'm not going to let that happen. So we pulled Keith out, and it was in that period of time that he attempted suicide. So but he went to CM. We pulled him out. We sent him to CM, which was, which we could not afford.
Catholic Memorial.
Catholic Memorial in
Yep.
West Roxbury.
Yep.
We could not afford it. As a matter of fact, we paid for CM instead of paying for our house. I said, granted, I don't worry that I'm going to have a place to live, but this chance for Keith to complete his education successfully and go on to college this is one chance. You can put a different roof over my head. I don't care about that, but I'm not going to risk his future on this. So we sent him to CM, and while at CM, he got another concussion. This was a year after the first one. And as you may or may not know, concussions are cumulative in impact. And at that point, I saw the symptoms resurge. And I said, you know what, I am not going down this road with him again. Absolutely not. And I knew that he had narrowly avoided death, and I wasn't going to risk this a second time. So it was at that point that I had been in the meantime reconciled with my sister, and she recommended Bill. So it was then that we got the CBD from Bill, and he hasn't looked back. I mean, my son he graduated from Trinity. He is now working at a law firm in New York City, getting ready to take the LSATs to attend law school. So I don't regret it. I don't regret a minute of it. And I think that what's important for people to understand is, it would have been easy for me to just be like, great, my kid's fine, and turn my back and walk away. That's fine. I could have done that. But I didn't see it that way. And part of it was because I needed money. Yeah, I'm not going to lie about that. But the other part of it was that, there's a scripture that reads, it's James 4:17, that he who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. So I remember thinking, okay, there are other parents out there who are literally wringing their hands over their concussed children. There are athletes out there whose lives are being ruined. There are athletes who are killing themselves. And this was before I understood what marijuana did for PTSD or did for cancer or did for any one of those other chronic illnesses that we now know, MS, Parkinson's. I was just looking at it from a concussion perspective. I said, I was lucky. I was lucky that I had a sister. I was lucky that I had access to somebody like Bill Downing. What about the millions of people out there who don't? Who takes care of them? And the way to Bill's point earlier, the way it looked to me was, if I could use an analogy, is that, you've got people drowning in a lake, all different rates, screaming, flapping their hands, drowning. And there are lifeguard chairs, and the lifeguards are the government. They're sitting up there and they're watching this. They are watching people drown. And they're just like, I'm not getting paid enough. I'm not getting enough money for me to make this rescue viable for me. I don't care about you. Go ahead and drown. Until I get paid enough, I am not going to come down and I am not going to help you. And I'm standing there. Once my eyes opened to it, and I it was like I was standing on the beach, and I'm like looking at people in the water and then looking at the government and saying, you're just going to let this happen? You're okay with this? Like, no, I'm not okay with this. So I said, all right, fine. If you're not going to do it, I'll do it. And in the end, it goes back to what I said earlier. If I have to pay a price for it, fine. It's not going to be any greater than any of the price that any of those other people are going to be asked to pay, which is death for a good number of them. I mean, how many people have saved their own lives with cannabis from cancer?
Well, yeah, I was at a business meeting a few weeks ago in Boston, and one of the individuals there in the cannabis sector, and he was 47 years in the military. He started to rattle off the number of military suicide deaths that they experience on a daily basis. So it is not small change on that.
No, it's not.
Deana, let me ask you another question. So when did the idea of starting a business first germinate in your mind?
I remember the conversation with my husband, and I remember saying that I don't remember the decision. I just remember the conversation and saying, listen, I'm going to start a marijuana delivery business. And him saying, I don't want to do that. That's not a good idea. And I said, listen, I'm not asking for permission. And that was it. I just did it. Does that make me a bad wife? Probably. But,
well, we're not a marital talk show, so we're going to skip that particular one. But I want to throw some other questions at you along those lines. So at that point in time, You'd already talked to Valerio, and we've had Valerio on the show in the past. He's a great
Good guy.
attorney,
Yeah, he's a really
well
good
known
guy.
in the state,
Yep.
a knowledgeable guy.
Yep.
So you've had discussions with Valerio. Why not go legal? Why not say, you know what, let's get the application in and I'll wait the X number of months of the year.
You mean then or now?
Then, right back
I
then.
did. Oh, I didn't. I did. I mean, but don't forget. I mean, as well as anybody how layered and complicated the process is.
Sure.
But you can hire Valeria, but that doesn't get you an HCA.
Right.
You still
don't
have
get the HCA unless you're willing to pay exorbitant amounts of money that are illegal, and that's a totally different subject.
Exactly. So
That
that's what
over
I
the
was.
next few months is going to get resolved by the courts with operators who have sued Massachusetts municipalities. And I think that's only going to accelerate. But I want to stay more with as you and I discussed, when I told you, look, this isn't going to be just all softball.
Of course.
Some of it is, we're going to ask you about when you got to forks in the road, what were the decisions you had to make, and why did you go one way versus the other? So I'm throwing that one out. Why didn't you say, look, get me licensed? What do I need to do to get the location?
I did say that basically, but they were parallel. So in other words, it took the state years to open the first dispensary after medical passed. When recreational passed, I wasn't optimistic that was going to go any faster. So in the meantime, how many people are dying day by day by day, right? How many people who didn't have to die or didn't have to suffer are suffering? So, I guess I just wasn't willing to wait to be told that it was okay to do what needed to be done immediately. I just felt there was a sense of urgency behind it, and urgency that, and I think that to sort of highlight that, I'll use an example of a veteran that I was working with that came to me in person, and we didn't see people in person at Northern Herb, but this one I had a sort of a relationship with, and he needed extract. He had gotten to the point where marijuana flower was too expensive. He wasn't getting enough THC, and he wanted extract. So he came to see me to actually pick up some extract, and he walked in and he was yellow and 40 pounds lighter than the last time I saw him. And I said, "What's going on with you?" He said, "Nothing. I just need the weed." And I said, "I'm not giving you a thing." I said, "I'm not giving you a thing until I know that what I'm giving you isn't causing you to look like that." I said, "Something's wrong. And I feel like I might be responsible for it. And until I know I'm not giving you a damn thing." So he said, "No, you have to understand, Deana, it's not you. It's not you." And I said, "I don't care what you say." I said, "I need to hear that from your doctor." So he got his doctor at the VA on the phone. And you have to know how impactful that is, right? Because they don't do that. I remember specifically the woman had a Russian accent. She said, "I am not supposed to talk to you." I heard her walk into a closet and shut the door behind her so she could talk to me. And she said, "You are not hurting him. Please give him anything he asks for. He's been overprescribed morphine. His liver is being eaten from the inside out. You need to do this for him." So I did. And I remember giving it to him. He left and I just sat there. I remember the day vividly. It was snowing and everybody had left the office. I sat there alone and I said, "You don't know where the rest of these people are. They are out there. You don't know who else is out there dying or at threat of dying. So you know what? Throw the doors open." Didn't mean I didn't screen people for age. I screen people for age always. I screen people for address verification always. I mean, we were very careful. And I think it's been said probably that we delivered recreationally. We didn't require medical cards. Well, that's true. Past January 1, 2017, we didn't require medical cards because it was recreationally legal. There just weren't any dispensaries open or recreational stores. So once, I don't know, I have to say that I was infuriated, and I'm writing a book, and I've tried many times to write the emotion behind that interaction with that veteran. And I can't, I'm incapable. I don't have the words to say how furious and sad. And I just remember literally wanting to hurt something because it was so wrong that he was dying. He was getting morphine on auto delivery, and somebody made a key punch error and this kid was dying. And I was like, you know what? it's not my responsibility to determine how much somebody else needs this. It's theirs. And if they need it and they need it from me, I am going to get it to them. And that's it. So that was the major crossroads for me, was like, where I might have been more willing to stay smaller and sort of under the radar, rather than limit to a certain number of deliveries a day, which would have kept me maybe safer than just throwing on the doors and being willing to go to however many deliveries, to however many orders came in the door. No, I just said, you know what, if you want it and I can get it to you, I'm going to get it to you. And that was where the supply pressure came in.
Okay, hang on for a minute, folks. We're going to take our bottom of the hour break. We're going to be right back. This is a great conversation, and I know Steve's got something that he wants to say. I can tell by the look on his face. So bear with us. We'll be right back on the Green Rush.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience, and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
And we're back. Thanks for hanging with us. It's Friday afternoon here in the Green Rush. We do this every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 here on Pro Cannabis Media. It is probably the most popular business talk show in the country related to cannabis. Omar had to jump during the break, as well as Bill Downing, but we've got at least another 30 minutes left here. And we're talking with Deana Martin about the what happened behind the scenes, what got her into the home delivery business. Pretty soon, we're going to start to ask her some questions about what advice she has to the current operators, because we now have home delivery legal here in Massachusetts. But people are still struggling as they try to get into the business. I do want to provide a little bit of color for some of what Deana mentioned. So in 2012, Massachusetts legalized marijuana for medical use. And they moved very quickly with an application process. It came out in 2013. It was not a rolling process. It was about 189 teams reporting to the Department of Public Health, running a marathon to get to a particular day in November of 2013, when the applications would be submitted during a very short window. They would be judged, and sometime, I believe in early 14, they were going to hand out what the decisions were. It turned into a mess. People who had political connections, whose teams actually scored lower on the applications, were awarded multiple licenses. There was a lot of litigation. Eventually, the governor threw his hands up, stopped the program, and kicked the can down the road to the next governor who came in. So our medical program got off to a very slow start. 2016, the voters of Massachusetts went back to the ballot box, as happens in presidential cycles, and they voted overwhelmingly, well, maybe not overwhelmingly, but I believe it was about a 54% approval that we should legalize marijuana for adult use. And what happened? After the legislature sat on their hands for years, refused to do anything, now all of a sudden they said, well, we don't like what the people did, so we're going to stop that and we're going to redo it. And by the time the licensing process started, I believe it was early 2018. So it took them 2 years, or maybe a little over a year and a half, just get the applications out. Folks applied, and our first stores opened the week before Thanksgiving in 2018. So that was the 2016 rollout. It takes a long time. So some of what Dean is suggesting, if you're not from the state, and you're leaning back and saying, well, why didn't she get licensed? Or there were a lot of delays. We have a license class for home delivery that has only started this year, even though it was legalized in 2016. And we still don't have social consumption sites. You want a beer or you want a drink, you can go into a bar and get one. If you'd like to do the same thing with marijuana, you can't yet, because the state still hasn't figured out how they're going to license those operations, even though we legalized marijuana in 2016. That was 5 years ago. So things are moving excruciatingly slow in many ways. And as you listen to Deana's story, that's an important backdrop. We have the advantage because pretty much everybody on this call happens to be from Massachusetts. But I just wanted to add that color to it. So Deana, let's just jump back into, we talked about why you didn't pursue the legal route, but why, if you started Northern Herb, didn't you try to do them concurrently and say, okay, I'm going to run Northern Herb and I'm still going to try to pursue the license on the side?
I did. That's exactly what I did. I as soon as I had the money, I hired Valerio and we began the process. We were looking for an HCA. We were looking for a host community. I had some debts left over, the tax, they were not going to give a dispensary license to somebody with tax debt. So my first, while I worked with Valerio to sort of learn the process and look for an HCA, I worked with a different lawyer in his office to resolve my tax debts. So that was actively what I was in the process of doing when things sort of blew up on me. So yes, no, I never thought that where I was where I needed to be. It was where I needed to start. And I think that in my mind, the way I locked is, you're going to ride the black into the white. And because I didn't want to stay where I was. I didn't want to be in the black market. I was there because that's where I was needed.
Okay. What, Kurt, or Steve, I'm sorry, Stephen, you had a question before we went on break. So let me jump in, or you looked like you had a comment or a question.
Yeah, I was really moved by you mentioning talking to a VA doctor, and it's important to point out to people that there are a lot of great physicians in the VA, but VA policy prohibits any sort of recommending or being filling out any paperwork or for any veteran to get access to it. I had a similar situation just recently, a couple weeks ago, where I had to go back on oxycodone for a little bit, and told my doctor wasn't working. He's like, well, can you just take more cannabis? And I'm like, I'd love to, but your stuff is free, the cannabis is not. So I get I go and pick up another bottle of it, and again, I have a physician that wants me to be using more cannabis, wants to recommend it to me, but due to policies, that can't happen. And to step up, and like you said, with so many veteran suicides, overdoses, you attribute some of those overdoses to PTSD and also to brain injuries from concussions and CTE. Mm-hmm. We're talking about people that sacrifice so much and put themselves in the most risky situation, to then be told that this plant is somehow riskier than the guns we carried, the rockets we carried, the grenades we carried, and the people that the places we were. So it's maddening to me. So I feel your pain there is like, you really just want to bang your head on a wall and be like, this can't be real life, and to know that there's so many women and men out there, veterans that have to deal with that, live with that. And the other states where they're still having to break the law to feel well, to be able to be better versions of themselves and have an improved quality of life, literally have to put jail time on the line to feel better. So it's maddening. It's insanity to me. But something I'm not going to give up on. And again, inspired by your ability to put, others first ahead of yourself. So that's I just want to make a comment on that. An incredibly moving story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that they were all rainbows and unicorns and happy endings. They weren't. And, you know, I mean, I had one veteran in particular who had a back injury, and he sort of tossed that whole scenario on my lap and said, listen, I have to pay $250 an ounce for the weed from you. I get those oxys mailed to me directly. Why should I he was challenging me. And I said, listen, I can't make that decision for you. I said, but I can't give it to you for free because you're not the only patient who needs it. I give it to you at the lowest price I can. But, you know, and, you know, honestly, that same veteran, you know, I mean, I put myself at physical risk. And in particular, this veteran was not, he was clearly exhibiting some, you know, some signs of PTSD, and I narrowly escaped being attacked. And that was another sort of crossroads where I thought, you know, I really, and I'm a woman, you know, I mean, I'm 140 pounds. I don't carry a gun. At any point, anybody that I'm dealing with, and I don't mean dealing in certain dealing drugs, but in a interaction with, can do whatever they want. And I mean, I was hopping in people's cars and going to people's front doors. I remember walking into some guy's house and he said, come here, I want to show you something. Like an idiot, I walked into a closet and I remember thinking, what the hell did you just do? It turned out he just wanted to show me his guitar collection, but I was just so naive to the risks I was putting myself in. But even that was galvanizing as opposed to, you know, terrifying. I was like, you know, he only behaved that way because it's a reality he lives with. That's what pain does to you. It turns you into a caricature of yourself in the worst way possible. So, you know, it was scary. I mean, I stopped doing deliveries myself shortly after that. And we had a very, very strict protocol. And, you know, of the thousands and thousands of deliveries that we did, we had 4 negative incidents. You know, so if you know, I mean, I'll leave that at that because I'm getting off track here, but yeah, I mean, there were definitely challenges, and that just made me more like determined that this was needed.
You know, we've talked a lot about your past and what you did. From what I understand, people that are going to be serving time kind of have to have something hopeful or something they look forward to in their future to serve their time. Now, we hope you get full clemency and you never see the inside of a jail. But what do you look forward to in life? What's your goal? What's going to keep you motivated to the future if you do have to do 2 to 3 or less, depending on how many shower fights you start?
I will not start any shower fights. I will tell you that. I just was awarded my 4th stripe in jiu-jitsu. So for 4-stripe white. So my goal is to be a blue belt before I have to report to anything. What I can do is I can put you to sleep and walk and step back without putting a mark on you. That I know I can do right now, but I will not be starting any fights. Beyond that, I look forward to a complete career change. I've written a book, and then I'm now in the process of rewriting it. And I've written a couple of screenplays. I work with a writer out of LA. I really work sort of as a consultant to his projects. I really don't have too many on I have a couple of screenplays that I've written on my own that have not yet been sold. My book has not yet been sold, but you know what, that's not a if scenario, it's a when scenario. And I think a lot of the literary agents and publishers that I have reached out to were hesitant to consider me until my case was resolved. Now that my case is resolved, there's an opportunity to go back. But in the process, you know, my perspective on the story's changed. My writing style has changed. And the book that I will write now will be much, much, much more effective and entertaining and direct than the book that I wrote 2 years ago. So I think that when I come out, that's what I'll be doing. It may take me a while to sell something, but I won't stop until I do.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Steve. You're on mute. I don't know. You're about to talk, and I just want to let you know you're on mute. So.
Oh no, I didn't. I was just reading the comments in there, and
are they on YouTube? Hey, David, how we doing on comments? Do we have anything we can ask on the YouTube comments or anything?
We've got there's a lot of interesting comments. Look, I'm going to go to the one that really struck out, which is way earlier in the feed. Deana, somebody would like to know where you got your glasses. They like them. I mean, for what we're talking about today, that one really struck me.
Warby Parker or one of those online sources. Honestly, this is the second pair. The lenses are crap. If you want to know the truth, they say they're scratch proof. They're not, but I think it's Warby Parker actually.
So, and we just got a comment. Jack Harrer wrote "The Emperor's New Clothes" while in prison. So, yeah. But let's go back to the part that most fascinates me, which is the business end of it. So how long was when did Northern Herb start in operation?
It was April of 2015. I bought my first pound.
April 2015, and you
Yeah.
stopped in August of
2018. Yeah.
Wow. So a little over 3 years.
Yeah.
By 2018, what kind of revenues were you generating? Or let's say on a monthly basis?
$1 million a month.
And so I know we've got a lot of home delivery operators that are tuning in, especially from MASCAD, the Association for Home Delivery here in the state. How you mentioned you couldn't call in to Northern Herb and just have it delivered immediately. Talk a little bit about if you were giving some advice to people who want to get into the delivery business based upon what you've learned and your experience and what you understand about the regulations, and you can't, like, I would assume when you delivered, you left it at people's doors or no?
They said that. We did that once, and we only did, well, let me clarify. We did it very rarely, and we only did it for regular customers to whom we had already delivered once or twice. So there were 2 or 3 customers that I was aware of that would say, okay, you're going to put it in my back shed or put it between the doors. And that was only for people who had ordered from us multiple times in the past. We did not leave the product out unattended.
And how many people car doing the deliveries? Was it 1 or 2?
I'm sorry?
How many folks did you have in a vehicle performing the delivery per vehicle? One. Okay. So
here's the thing. I know there's this whole two driver thing. What does that exist for? Is it for the driver's safety, or is it for the safety of the product, or is it for the concern over the money? I think it is a cover. My view on that, and I testified to this, was if you want to have a second driver and you want to have body cameras, that's all well and good. But my recommendation during the public testimony was those provisions should automatically sunset as soon as marijuana is no longer illegal at the federal level. I just think that is. But if that's the case, then the reason that rule exists is not to protect the drivers; it's to protect the weed, right? And to protect the money. Why else is
to protect the state
necessary? From what?
From federal interference. I think all the states want to show the Fed.
How do 2 drivers protect the states from federal interference?
Because nobody can steal the car. They're going to, some of this is overkill. I mean,
okay. So the point is that the 2 drivers don't protect you from anything. Okay.
Yep.
Because the fact is that if people are going to steal, they're going to steal. And why it needs to be legally mandated to protect weed or to protect the product makes no sense when somebody can walk into a liquor store at any point in time and buy enough booze to kill themselves with and proceed to do that right in the parking lot. What weed cannot kill you. So what is the protective point there? You're protecting somebody from stealing it so that they would go and hurt themselves with it, or you're worried about money, or you're worried about people being robbed. You can rob 2 people as easily as you can rob 1. You got a gun and they don't, it's going to happen. The 2 driver it's a false sense of security. It's not doing anything but increase the cost.
Yep. So Kurt will, go ahead, Steve.
No, you're right. I had 1 mailman delivering my Percocet, delivering my fentanyl.
Yep.
And that's the federal government doing it. So they weren't looking to protect the mailman. So
no.
Steve, is he still with us today?
What's that?
Is your mailman still with us today?
I got a new mailman. Yeah.
Oh, see, look what happened to him. He didn't have a second mailman.
So back in 1972, 50% of the U.S. population believed that you could overdose on marijuana. Nixon appointed a commission, and that commission spent a year investigating. They flew around the country, spent millions of dollars, had a staff of 73 people. And after a year, they couldn't find 1 instance of an overdose. In fact, the commission basically said, this whole thing is, it's overkill. It's a waste of time. We ought to just decriminalize it and not worry about it. Unfortunately, that's not what Nixon wanted to hear. He killed the report. And Ray Schaefer, the former governor of Pennsylvania, who was the head, he was the Robert Mueller of his time, never got his appointment to the federal bench he was looking for. But the general government misinformation campaign about weed is just bizarre when you begin to start to dig through the books and take a look at it.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, what advice would you give to the operators? Like, well, one of the concerns I have about home delivery right now is the Amazon guys go up and down your street and they can leave the boxes at the front door. The marijuana folks can't. They have to hand deliver it, and it can't just be handed to somebody. It's got to be handed to the person who made the order.
Yep.
So if Kurt places the order and he's not home and his wife is, she can't accept the order for him. Right.
We operated very much like that. We only allowed a secondary recipient with notice, and in which case we would ask for ID from the secondary individual.
Yep.
So and the way we worked that was just to be there when they were home, which is why we didn't do deliveries during the day. We did them in the evening. And if you couldn't accept delivery in the evening, you just didn't order from us. And and I suppose that's restrictive, but I suppose that if you were operating today and you were going to operate using the route model, which is what we use as opposed to an on-demand model, you could do evening routes and you could do morning routes. And obviously your morning routes would be much smaller than your evening routes, but or you do them different areas and different times of the day. But it makes no sense to be doing on-demand deliveries, none whatsoever.
How late did you deliver till?
Our drivers went out with a certain number of stops, and we over time we learned what the capacities were of each individual driver. So there were some that were better than others. There were some that were faster than others, and there were some routes that were more dense than others. So for example, someone going to Brighton, and we had a Brighton route, we had a Boston route, we had a North, like Malden, Medford. I mean, we got to the point we were going to pretty much all areas inside of 495, and the busier we got, the denser the routes got. But, so a really capable driver on a dense route could do 25 stops in an evening. And we had a process. So you place the order, the goal was to have all the drivers on the road by 3. So that means we stopped taking orders between 1 and 1:30, and we would finish packing. The orders would be lined up in routes. We had a software program that allowed us to push them. So the orders got pushed to the driver's cell phone. So the drivers knew where they were going. They could route their own, or they could, the software we were using was beginning to institute an AI-based route software that we didn't end up using. Most of them used Waze. They would put their stops into Waze and they would organize them. And the deal was that the first thing they had to do was call all their customers and say, I'm your driver for this evening. This is the time I expect to be in your area. That was the first call. Every driver was responsible for calling or texting every customer before they got on the road. Call number 1. Call number 2 was when you were next. So once they did delivery 1, while they were finishing delivery 1, they called delivery 2 and said, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And if the person did not pick up their second phone call, that delivery got skipped and it would be put on for the next day. And we would make another attempt. If they didn't receive by the second attempt, the product would just be put back into stock. It was brilliantly efficient. People wanted their orders,
You were so ahead of your time compared to, say, Amazon right now, which gives drivers 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes in between stops. So a 10-hour route at Amazon will be a max of about 199 stops, 330 packages during Christmas right now.
Wow.
And they literally have very similar models of, you got to contact the customer, you got to try twice. And they instituted last year, hey, we're 10 stops away if you guys order from Amazon, which is what you were doing 5-6 years ago, just for me.
Yeah. I mean, it was, we had challenges. We had a couple of drivers robbed. And what we found out was that what was happening was that if you didn't know who you were delivering to, you couldn't guarantee the safety of your driver. So that meant that what was happening is people were submitting fake IDs and then having you deliver to an address other than the one that was on the ID. So you didn't really know who you were dealing with. So what we instituted after that was, for a first-time customer, we needed an ID and we needed a piece of mail, a utility bill, a bank statement, or something that confirmed who you were and what address we were going to. Once we did that, we never again had a problem.
Interesting. So
would a second driver in those couple of robbery situations have made any difference?
No, because in both of these cases, the guy had a gun. And I told them all my drivers, I said, whatever they want, you give them. You, I can't replace. I can replace the money. I can replace the product. You do whatever you have to do to be safe. But we're talking about tens of thousands of deliveries over the life of that company. And we had 4 incidents. I'm telling you, pizza delivery guys get robbed more often than that.
Did any of your drivers ever have issues with police getting stopped?
Yes.
You did?
They did, yeah. I mean, we had a couple of them, 2, actually not often. I want to say maybe 3.
Wow.
And one of them, they all wound up in legal trouble to a certain extent, but ended up going nowhere. They ended up being dropped.
Well, you had some really good drivers then with that many deliveries and only having that many issues. So
Yeah.
wow.
I mean, we were, we were very disciplined, and I wish I really can't speak for the people who work for me. I know how I felt about them. I can't say that they felt the same way about me, but to me, it was a family, and it was, if I took care of them, I knew they would take care of me. And if you were going to steal from me, you were going to steal from me no matter whether I treated you well or not. But I would only give you the chance to do that once. So if you came back and the money was missing from your package, we knew you were stealing. That's it. We just would never have you back again. But the value of the human is never less than the value of the product. You know what I mean? So if I couldn't trust you, I didn't keep you. But there was no need for me not to, while you work for me, support you the best way I could. And when we had those robberies, I knew exactly what happened. It was a failing inside the office, and I was furious. We had the whole team to my house to talk about it and said, the office failed you. I said, and this is how they failed you. And this is what we're doing to make sure that never happens again, because you're out there relying on us to make sure that we've done our work to keep you safe. And for the like I said, once that happened, we never had another issue. So this 2-driver rule is ridiculous. The body camera rule, all you're protecting at that point is the money. And, and that's a decision that should be made by the operator, not by the state. Because what does the state care whether you're getting stolen from or not? They don't care whether or not somebody's stealing out of the register at Walmart. So if the operator feels that a body camera is keeping their assets safer, fine. What you really need are policies that keep the driver safe. And what keeps the driver safe is knowing where you're going and who you're going to, because at that point, that customer is accountable for the touch with that driver. If that driver stops communicating with their base after they're with you, and we know who you are, we know where to go if there's an issue with our driver. Does that make sense? But you can't stop a driver from getting into a car accident. You can't stop a driver from drinking while they drive. It doesn't matter whether you're working for Amazon or whether you're working for Northern Herb. Those risks exist anyway. But when you do things like create pointless, policies that really don't enforce safety, what you're doing is you're ignoring what real safety measures look like. You have a false sense of security. And that's exactly what this 2-driver and body cameras do. If somebody steals your marijuana, who cares? As long as the driver doesn't get hurt.
Right.
All right. I got to ask you, we're almost at the very end of the show, and it's the cliffhanger moment. And I think just from speaking to you previously in life, it's a great story. What everybody wants to know, how'd you get caught? Tell that part.
Oh, you want to know the truth? All right.
Always.
I did not get caught because of anything I did. I got caught because I did business with a gentleman. I'll call him a gentleman for lack of a more appropriate term, a less appropriate term, because a gentleman that had been previously raided by the FBI. Now, I'm sorry. Now, this was a gentleman who had a previous federal conviction for cocaine, was actually won a cannabis cup, was written about in, I'm drawing a blank on what's the big High Times.
High Times.
High Times wrote an article, used his last name. He got busted by the feds because he had already been a federal, he was on their radar anyway, previous conviction. He was raided once for weed, taken away. 10 months later, he went back into business, got raided a second time. So now this guy with a previous federal conviction is looking at a RICO indictment. So at that point, the feds work looking for the bigger fish. So if he doesn't want to go to prison for 20 years, he's got to give them someone else. And I happen to be the someone else he gave. So in other words, I was proffered out against. That means that somebody offered up my head to save their own. And basically that option existed for me too. I was asked at the raid, are you willing to pretend this didn't happen? I said, what do you mean? And this raid didn't happen. I said, really?
You're
I said,
in my house.
Do you really think that this isn't already gone coast to coast by now? I said, no. So basically the offer to me was, tell us who you're buying from and we'll go easy on you. I mean, how many have we seen that in a freaking Law and Order episode?
Right.
And I'm usually sitting there telling the criminal to keep the damn mouth shut until their lawyer comes. And I said the same thing. I said, no, I'm not going to tell you anything. I want my lawyer. And the whole time we were at the raid, no, they wouldn't let me speak to my lawyer. So, I'm not going to say I'm some snitches get stitches individual. I'm not. But the fact is that the people I dealt with were no bigger or smaller than I was. We were just a network of people that had access to a product that I happened to want to buy. And I was not going to bring them down with me. This guy, you know what? He had what was coming to him. He had dealt cocaine in his younger days, and now he got twice by the feds. He should have just taken his lumps, but he didn't. He turned me in. So it wasn't like I did something, or that I was as open as I was. It was not what I was doing that brought the feds' attention to me. It
wasn't the Porsche.
No, you know what? That was the worst decision I ever made. Honest to God.
I'd read that. I was like, and it was right before,
Yeah. That's probably what was like the coup de grace for the feds, and I gave it to them.
Right in the Hollywood movie, the Lamborghini pulls up in front of a Milton house, and that's how they get you.
All right,
so the movie's gonna go. Yep.
We're at the top of the hour, folks. We're going to take a real quick break. Come back. We're going to figure out whether we're going to do a wrap up or keep going. Zack had to leave us because it's Friday night, and when you have young kids, you got to pick up the kids and get pizza. But I think the rest of our crew that's still here is going to hang here for a minute. So Dan's going to bring us to a break, and we're going to come back in a few minutes. Hang in there. We'll be right back on Friday afternoon on the Green Rush.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Hey, thanks for hanging with us. We're back Friday afternoon here in the Green Rush. We're actually going to, Jimmy's not around, so we're going to keep going a little bit. We've got Deana Martin. It's been a great show. We've learned a lot, and we're going to hang out for another 15 minutes or so and keep the discussion going. And with that, I'm going to toss it back to Kurt, because while we were on break, Kurt had a couple of interesting questions and we kind of held him back. Deana knows what the questions are, so it's not going to be a surprise, but go ahead, Kurt.
She's had time to think. We have a YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd like your vote. There is a book. Let's hope in the future there's a movie with a Clemency walking out of the front steps of the White House. Who plays Deana in the movie? And give us your suggestions. I'm going Reese Witherspoon. I think that's a no-brainer. But let's see what you think. Who plays her? We'll say 2-ish years from now. She's got to finish the book, a little jail time, get it all polished up, movie rights, the works.
All right. I'm gonna say Marissa Tomei.
That's, I think, what you said the last time I asked you to.
Yeah,
okay,
no, I liked her.
That's not bad. You know what? That's not bad. I like those 2 selections already.
All right.
So, Kurt, if the show makes it into the book, right,
Yep.
This episode, who plays you?
Obviously, Brad Pitt.
Matt
That's the stupidest
Damon.
question. Yeah, Matt Damon. There. Okay, thanks. I'll take that. Yeah, exactly. How far down do I get from there?
So, on the business side of things, it sounds like you kept the deliveries from starting at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And how late into the evening would you deliver?
I wanted my drivers off the road by 9, no later than 10. Anything beyond that. And I remember I used to tell my drivers, I'm like, anything beyond 9 o'clock and you cease to be a delivery guy and you start to be a drug dealer. And that's not what I want. Like my guys were not allowed to wear baggy jeans, sweatpants, or hoodies. They had to wear collared shirts, black pants. It's a distinct difference, but it's shades. And I just never wanted to appear like that shady back door.
Nope.
You know.
So in Massachusetts now, the home delivery operators are allowed to deliver between 8 a.m. in the morning, and they have to finish their final delivery by 9 p.m. So it sounds like a lot of what you've learned is going to be very apropos for delivery operators who are watching the show. Wait, if you were to go back into this business, how would you start up? What would you do? How would you attract customers? Because my understanding is you did advertising in like Craigslist and other places like that.
Craigslist was in the very, very beginning. And you know, I mean, and Craigslist disallows marijuana. And the rules for advertising on social media have shifted and changed over the years. But I would say that there are always online advertising options. You just have to know where to go, right? And you have to know what to say and what not to say. Granted, I've been out of it for 3.5 years. I don't know what shifts have taken place since then. Like I said, Allbud was very instrumental for us in the early years. But once you've got a customer base, if you take care of your customer base, they will take care of you. And I think that really when it comes to marijuana and delivery, maintaining an ongoing relationship is really where profit is. So you've got to take good care of them, and then you've got to encourage them to refer their friends. It's old school, but because there are so many restrictions on advertising, it's reliable. It may not be the fastest, but you know what, we turned our customer base into a community, and I think that would be an important consideration for a current delivery business. So in other words, make them feel like they're part of something. Let them help you make decisions about the products that you carry and the strains that you offer. And that pulls them in. It makes them feel like you're in this together. And that's pretty much what Northern Herb was a community.
You kind of piggybacking off what David said, you look at 3.5 years out, you have Uber Eats, you have delivery, you have legalization, you have delivery license. Do you just were you born at the wrong time? Do you look at what's at your fingertips now if you were going to get involved and say, oh God, I could do so much with these pieces?
Well, if with legalization, yeah, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I think that what I loved most about Northern Herb, it was, and this is going to sound awful, was the absence of oversight. And I think that because, like I said, it was a pure free market model. We followed Massachusetts law, but the fact that we're in the position we were in, we were free from this sort of ridiculousness of pointless regulation. I think that I would find it very restrictive to be where the market is now. I would hope that as time moves on, that common sense would prevail. And my hope is that, I mean, the people that my sources believe the federal legalization is much closer at hand than Omar thought. I mean, apparently from what I'm being told, they need 12 senators. They've got 6. The expectation is that they hope that they'll have the next 6 that they need sometime next year. I think that the Republicans may be reluctant to give the Democrats the victory. I'm getting off track here a little bit, but the point is that a Republican just suggested their own legalization bill. And I think at this point with the 2022 elections, the party most likely to prevail is the one that can bring this issue home. And I think they know that. But, so if there is federal legalization and it does normalize and the states become more cognizant of the fact that they're dealing with a commodity that is not dangerous and that the regulation becomes common sense, then yeah, I'd be, I'd have no problem stepping back in and being just as effective as I was before. But I have, as you can tell, I have very little patience for silliness. And a lot of what's being done right now is flat out silly. And, I am satisfied, as much as it's relevant for me to be satisfied, that people now have access when they didn't when I first started. Because don't forget, things look very different during the years that Northern Herb operated. And, would I be as compelled now to go out there and protect people? No, because there are options. And, they may not be ideal, they may not be perfect, but they're not non-existent. So, I don't know. I think if I were to go back into the weed business, it would have to be in a capacity where I could really make a difference, not just spend my time, satisfying regulators, because I think that's a lion's share of what people are in the industry are doing right now. And that might be on the advocacy side. It might be on a consultancy side. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed it. And I think one of the things I enjoyed the most, we haven't touched on this at all yet, is being a woman in a predominantly male dominated industry. Guys did not know what to do with me. And it was so funny because I was old enough to be most of their mothers. So there wasn't any of that silliness, that flirting silliness I had to deal with, but there was this sort of recognition of who I was relative to who they were. And I know that's changing. I know there are a lot of more women in weed than there were when the industry first became legal, 10, 15 years ago. But, I think I miss the satisfaction of it. And if I couldn't be in a role that gave me that satisfaction of having made a difference for someone, I wouldn't want to be a part of it. I'd just as soon go write screenplays about child trafficking that could save people's lives. If it doesn't help somebody, it just doesn't feel good to me. And I think that, spending, 3/4 of your life filing reports with the state to make sure that every ounce of weed that you generated is accounted for when it really can't hurt anybody anyway, this makes no sense.
Well, this has been a great discussion, Deana. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend the afternoon with us. I'm going to go around real quick and see if Kurt or Steve have anything. No, Watson, you don't get to do.
Go ahead, Steve.
Chime in on this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to see if Kurt or Steve have anything final. Give you a moment to say anything else you'd like to say, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. But this has been another great show, and I thank you. Kurt, you have any closing comments?
I was going to let Steve go ahead and go first, our guest.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to emphasize something that Deana just said. Buy your cannabis from women. Would love to see more of that. Your passion is inspiring, Deana, in that you did that out of wanting to help people more than making money helps,
No,
but you did it because you wanted to help these people, and these people coming to you for help, and you knew the risk and you still took that risk. So that's inspiring to me. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do on behalf of veterans.
Thank you.
Dina, you know what you got to do. Day one, find the biggest, meanest lady in that prison. You know what you got to do.
Yeah, no, funny. I've heard that before, but no, I will not be that. You know what I will be, and this is what I've said before, that for all I know that I'm trying to resist something that will be the best thing that ever happens to me. But this is the thing, women coming out of federal prison, whether it's me or somebody else, don't have the best employment options, right? So what's your best option when you come out of prison? If somebody's not going to hire, if nobody's going to hire you, start your own goddamn business. So I will be in there teaching women how to start their own businesses.
We want the first interview when you come out the gate.
What's that?
We want the first interview when you come out the gate.
Sounds fair. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, but sounds fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, this has been a great show. I want to thank all of our guests, the ones who are here, as well as the ones who had to jump off a little bit early, as well as for Dina, because we kept her talking for better than an hour and a half. It's rare that we do those kind of shows, but this topic really deserved it. It was important for us to peel back the onion and let everybody hear from Dina in her own words, the other side of the story versus what's been printed in the press. And Dina, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And thanks for tuning in. It's as Jimmy would say, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. We will see you again next week. I won't be here because I'll be on an airplane, but I know we're going to have a great show. Jimmy, I believe, is going to host it. Not sure who we're going to have for a co-host, but it's going to be a great time. And once again, thank you to everybody.
Great. Take care, guys. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, the clock is ticking in Washington, D.C. Will cannabis reform be attached to the defense bill? That has to be passed before the end of the year. 5 years in, and Alaska's weed market is in trouble with back taxes and oversaturation. Plus, only 9% of New York cities and towns opt out of allowing cannabis businesses to open. The Empire State is ready to welcome cannabis, while South Dakota strikes down a voter-approved adult use market. All that and more, state-by-state reports on We Talk News next. Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto for Weed Talk News and Pro Cannabis Media. It's officially the final month of 2021, and Congress has until the end of the year to pass its annual National Defense Authorization Bill. Now, some lawmakers want to attach cannabis banking legislation to that bill. Representative Ed Perlmutter says the move makes sense because drug cartels and foreign money laundering are directly linked to national security. And most recently, this week, more than a dozen financial and union groups are imploring that language be added to protect banks working with state legal cannabis businesses. If lawmakers heed the plea, it could help pave an easier path to federal legalization heading into the new year. Adult use cannabis is coming to New York State. Seemingly every corner of it too. When states pass legislation, municipalities have the ability to opt out of being home to any recreational shops. But out of 84 towns and 46 villages in the Empire State, only 9% say they don't want to partake in the adult use market. In California, that number is 68%. With one of the lowest opt-out percentages in history of legalization, it looks like New York is ready to welcome the weed world with open arms. With more on happening out on the East Coast, Claudia Post has our Pennsylvania report.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express. a nationwide same-day cannabis delivery service, and I'm right here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, to bring you a report on what's hot and what's not. Dr. Mehmet Oz announced that he would run for the now vacant Republican seat, which Senator Toomey occupied for many, many years. The good news is that Dr. Oz, although he's not a politician, is pro-cannabis. That's great news for Pennsylvania. A survey from Franklin and Marshall College said that now there are over 60% of Pennsylvanians who are in favor of adult use legislation. That's the highest level of support we've ever gotten. And regulators in Pennsylvania are going to test all vaporized equipment. And I'm going to read exactly what they are looking for. Grower processor companies, which are licensed by the state, must submit samples of vape products containing anything that alters the dosage level, color, appearance, smell, taste, effect, or weight of the medical marijuana. And that's a little crazy to me. Anyway, that's it from Pennsylvania. Thank you so much. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, talking for Weed Talk News.
Legendary California-based dispensary Harborside announced it's acquiring Southern California-based Urban Leaf, as well as cultivator, manufacturer, and distributor Loudpack. The combined operation, called State House Holdings, slated to be among the largest vertically integrated companies in the Golden State. With the latest on our Green Market Report, here's Deborah Borchardt.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Green Wednesday 2021 was a big one for the cannabis industry, while Black Friday kind of fizzled in comparison. Green Wednesday saw cannabis sales increase across the U.S., but on Black Friday, we didn't see the same kind of sales growth that we've seen in previous years, although some data showed that Black Friday had larger order values and even bigger discounts than Green Wednesday. Harborside had a big week. They announced they were buying Urban Leaf and Loudpack. Now, the newly combined company is going to be called State House Holdings. They said they expect to begin trading this new company on the Canadian Securities Exchange using the symbol STHZ. That deal is expected to close in the first half of 2022. Now, in addition to announcing this big transaction, Harborside also delivered some sobering news to investors. The company said it was withdrawing its previous revenue guidance for 2021 and that it would revisit the forecast after the deal closes. The newest cannabis SPAC, or that Special Purpose Acquisition Corp, Canna Global Acquisition Corp, priced their initial public offering of $200 million and began trading on the NASDAQ this week using the ticker symbol CNGLU. The SPAC said it has not selected a business combination target as of yet. And that has been your business update from the Green Market Report. I'm Deborah Borchardt.
Alaska's had a thriving legal market for the last 5 years, or so it seemed. Now, tax problems are plaguing businesses on the last frontier. According to the state's Department of Revenue this year, 56 companies owe more than $1 million in back taxes. 9 of those businesses have since closed. And while some say these are expected growing pains of the industry, some advocates in Alaska are looking into possible reform to help stabilize things. Another leader in the legal industry, California. Let's check in with Christopher Smith for our California report.
Hey, thanks for the intro, guys. Here's the California Roundup for Weed Talk News. This week, I'm all about legends. Legend number 1, Harborside. 3 of the biggest players in the California cannabis industry are combining forces to form a new integrated business called State House. Legendary Oakland-based dispensary Harborside is joining San Diego-based Urban Leaf, a dispensary and delivery company, and Loudpack, which adds manufacturing, cultivation, and distribution. Retail industry specialist Ed Schmaltz, the CEO of Urban Leaf, is expected to become CEO of State House and join the board. Schmaltz is a graduate of Deerfield, Yale, and Harvard Business School. He has a blue-chip business track record. He was CFO of Patagonia when he was only 28 and CEO of several leading retail brands since then. The force is strong with this one. Legend number 2, the Wizard of Oz. Now, they say that Los Angeles is the biggest single cannabis marketplace in the world. It's the biggest city and the biggest cannabis state, blah, blah, blah. So it's a big deal when LA Weekly brings out its annual Best Of issue. Heading an esteemed list of best dispensaries in LA is Alternative Herbal Health Services in West Hollywood, better known by its acronym OZ. So naturally, the owner is known as the Wizard of Oz. That would be Jason Beck, who is the longest continuous retail operator of cannabis in the United States. Legend number 3, cannabis and crime, but this time, we're the good guys. In the case of where the real world is imitating the digital world, criminal gangs in Northern California are executing what amounts to denial of service attacks on retail stores. Now, a hacker knows that a denial of service attack is when outside computers issue thousands of commands at once that overwhelm a company's security software. In the real world, over the past few weeks, there have been multiple robberies by dozens of armed criminals at once who escape in up to 100 vehicles. Cannabis companies have been hit multiple times, and a bigger problem has emerged. A video of police watching a dispensary get knocked over and doing nothing to stop it. Police refusal to protect legitimate tax-paying businesses is discrimination, plain and simple. Cannabis businesses are demanding equal treatment by Johnny Law. In the meantime, they're arming up to protect their businesses, so we're hoping that real life doesn't start to imitate Call of Duty. And legend number 4, cannabis taxes are killing the legal industry. One of the reasons why California's illicit cannabis industry is twice as big as the legal side is high taxes. Cannabis taxes make legal product up to twice as expensive, and the choice is simple for twice as many customers. In an attempt to support the legal industry, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to suspend the city cannabis taxes for all of next year. Sounds great, right? Well, the tax is only between 1% and 5%. It won't even scratch the surface of the problem. But hopefully, Governor Gavin Newsom will get the message in the State House. And I'm Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report, sending peace and love from the legendary cannabis state of California for Weed Talk News.
Last November, people in South Dakota voted to pass medical and adult use cannabis. But the high court there might be a bit high on power. This week, the South Dakota Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling to essentially strike down everything voters wanted. According to South Dakota state law, constitutional amendments can only address one issue at a time. And the amendment voters chose to pass addresses 3: adult use cannabis, medical cannabis, and industrial hemp. So the court is saying it can't happen. Activists say they're already preparing a renewed legalization effort for next year's ballot, and with more on a newer market out in the Midwest. Here's Thomas Howard with our Illinois report.
Hi, I'm Tom, the cannabis industry lawyer that you can find on cannabisindustrylawyer.com, and here with 3 stories from Weed Talk News for Illinois for the week that is December 2nd, 2021. 14 lawsuits that are pending in Illinois Cook County Court calling for a complete redo of the state's cannabis license were ordered consolidated into a single super case, with one suit that challenges the entire scoring process as unconstitutional, especially the veterans points, was severed from the group and put into its own case docket, which is quite interesting because all the other ones are to see if they were unjustly left out from lotteries. And in another story, a third Curaleaf location in Illinois has voted to unionize. Curaleaf dispensary workers in Skokie voted overwhelmingly to join Local 881 of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, and continuing to grow a trend of unionization in Illinois. Fun fact, Illinois required you to either have a labor peace agreement or a plan to deal with organized labor when you were doing your applications. And finally, Miami-based Air Wellness continues its quest to become a major cannabis industry player with a recent $55 million purchase of only 2 Chicago-based dispensary 33 locations. The city's only remaining independent cannabis operation, which is kind of hilarious considering that this family spent $1.75 million on lottery tickets and won 18 lotteries or 18 cannabis dispensaries in the recent Illinois dispensary lotteries. And that's all I got for this week. My name's Tom. Don't forget to check me out on Cannabis Legalization News on YouTube.
Activists in Ohio say they'll have enough signatures by the end of this month to force the legislator to consider a legalization proposal early next year. If they can gather nearly 133,000 signatures, lawmakers will then have 4 months to adopt, reject, or amend legislation for adult use. If lawmakers don't make a decision in that time frame, activists will then need to double the amount of signatures gathered to put legalization before voters on the 2022 ballot. Let's travel a bit to the north, where Michigan NORML Director Rick Thompson has our Michigan report. Rick.
This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Loom Cannabis processed about 170,000 cannabis plants in 2021, according to a news story on the Pioneer. That's just from 2 locations in Michigan, an indoor garden near Evart, which produced about 150,000 plants, and an outdoor grow near Tawas with 20,000 plants. That translated to approximately 40,000 pounds of dried usable cannabis. The outdoor garden's harvest is primarily used for oil production, which is utilized in making baked products and edibles, a spokesman said. Each adult use cannabis cultivation license allows the growing of 2,000 plants. Their most popular strains include Jenny Kush, Uncle Bruce, and Blueberry Crumble. Now, Ohio may be launching a new recreational cannabis program, or it may launch more than one, actually. WTOL from Columbus reports that the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol is nearing their signature threshold and may submit petitions for verification before the end of this year in order to place the cannabis legalization proposal on the November 2022 ballot. Their proposal gives 2.5 ounces as a possession limit or 15 grams of concentrate, and they allow just 2 plants per adult for home cultivation, 4 plants per home maximum. It's a weird program in Ohio. They have to collect 133,000 signatures, and then the legislature has 4 months to adopt their proposal or not. If not, the group has to return to the streets and collect another big set of signatures. Now, there is a competing proposal, 2 of them, in fact. One from legislative Democrats, which would include expungement, give a 5-ounce possession limit, and have other improvements. That was offered in August. A yet-to-be-released counterproposal has been hinted at by legislative Republicans in Ohio, but they're already past their announced deadline for disclosure on that plan. Now, many of Michigan's border communities have cannabis retail locations, and if Ohio chooses an adult use program, those guys will eventually suffer from it. If any of these proposals become law, it won't be till the end of next year and tack on some more time to get an industry up and running. And this is a potential change, which looks more like a 2023 event. Now, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce filed an amicus brief in support of Veritas Labs, the embattled testing company subject to a massive recall. In the Chamber's press release, they said, quote, "The Michigan Chamber is deeply concerned about the impact of what appears to be an extreme and unconstitutional government overreach by the MRA," end quote. Now, their tone-deaf approach to supporting business, especially businesses which financially support the chamber, is just the latest in a series of automatic responses to any government threat to corporate wellness. The chamber routinely champions causes which directly translate to greater danger to Michigan citizens by asking to ease restrictions on the alcohol and tobacco industries. Nothing new to see here. But there is something new from the Court of Claims. The Veritas request for immediate injunction had a 2-day hearing this week on Wednesday and Thursday. The lab has been subject to recall for failing to properly document their testing of microbials and aspergillus. Retesting of the cannabis in question is possible and has been moving along at a rapid pace. During testimony on Thursday, the representative from the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, Claire Patterson, said of the 829 product packages they're tracking, 73% are passing their microbial tests and are fit for retail sale. But that means 27% of the retested cannabis has failed testing and must either be remediated and used for concentrates or destroyed. She also described some consumer complaints about the recalled cannabis, including some reports of hospitalizations. The judge in that case has not released his decision as of this recording. The recall is the largest in Michigan's cannabis history and includes 64,000 pounds of cannabis worth an estimated $229 million at retail. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
The state of Missouri has implemented what seems to be a very successful medical marijuana program. Now, groups are setting their sights on recreational use for adults. A coalition filed an initiative with the Secretary of State in August, and they have until May to gather 170,000 signatures, which would force a statewide vote on the ballot for the 2022 election. With that, here's Brandon Jones with our Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, this is Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, Jimmy. Yeah, we are trying to get recreation passed here in Missouri. I am one that has already signed that petition, so we're one less away from needing that signature. KC Normal has been a great group. The Can Evangelist has really been getting the word out and trying to get these signatures. So I'm very excited to see if we can get rec going here in Missouri by 2022, at least on the election. My first story today comes out of St. Louis, where they've actually decriminalized weed possession and home grows. So you're now allowed to have up to 2 ounces of cannabis in your possession, and you can actually have 6 plants going through cultivation at your own premises. So this is a big change. And if you know the Missouri laws, you're allowed to have 6 plants in each phase if you actually get your license, but this allows you to have just 6 plants in any phase. My next story is a little bit of a personal story. This is kind of a little weird thing. I had a surgery last week, and I got a call from my primary surgeon 2 hours prior to the surgery asking about my things that I put down for things that I was taking for prescriptions. And I had written down cannabis. And he said, well, my anesthesiologist wanted to confirm that this was medical cannabis, because if it's not, we're going to have to cancel the surgery. And I was just taken aback for a second. And obviously, in my mind, all cannabis is medical cannabis. So I just told him, yes, I am a legal card holder here in the state of Missouri. And so I am allowed to have my medical cannabis. And so he relayed that back to the anesthesiologist, and I was allowed to have my procedure. When I went to the hospital, I did make sure that I talked to the anesthesiologist about what medical cannabis is and what regular cannabis is. And so we did have a nice little discussion, told him a little bit about my history and how cannabis got me off opioids. So, just a little personal note that, yeah, the stigma is still here and alive in Kansas City, but we're working on it. And like I said, trying to get recreation passed here in 2022. So I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with your Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.
The head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse is weighing in on the effects of cannabis. In a new interview, Director Nora Volko said, quote, "There's no evidence to my knowledge that occasional marijuana use has harmful effects to adults." She went on to say she found it, quote, "surprising that some research indicates that cannabis consumers tend to have a lower body mass index." Volko put emphasis on the need for regulated studies on the effects of cannabis consumption. And for more on what's going on in the medical world of weed, Jessie Lynn Dolan's in Vermont with our Green Nurse Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. The Vermont Medical Society, representing 2,400 physicians and physician assistants, is urging state officials to follow proposed legislation in Colorado and Washington banning the sale of cannabis with more than 15% THC, which would make Vermont the first in the country with such THC caps. They are asking for health warnings on all cannabis products. Vermont is now open for business for international corporate giants. Toronto-based Slang Worldwide acquired ownership of the Ceres Med dispensary in Southern Vermont. You might remember Ceres as the Southern Vermont Wellness and Champlain Valley dispensaries. While Slang watched 5 board members and their CEO resign last week, they still were able to take out a $17.3 million loan to build out their Vermont operation. Last week, Vermont's Cannabis Control Board removed testing for total yeast and mold counts from its testing requirements and replaced it with species-specific testing instead. This can be seen as a huge win for the cannabis community because some organisms that test as mold are actually important for the plant. The Cannabis Control Board finally released a suite of proposed rules for the new industry, ranging from licensing requirements, compliance plans to positive social and environmental impacts. They also came up with guides for business regulations, employee education, and product tracking and advertising. Some potential retailers see those marketing restraints as punitive. The Vermont Growers Association has partnered with Vermont Legal Aid to set up free online cannabis expungement clinics to help remove past convictions and provide a fresh start to Vermonters in the emerging industry. This could help many Vermonters who have nonviolent cannabis convictions. These are free, private, virtual consultations with local attorneys that specialize in expungement and restorative justice, with the first clinic held on December 4th. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
A new poll from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and WCVB shows the majority of Massachusetts favors legal cannabis. 5 years into adult use legalization, the poll found 61% of people favored legal use, with 37% saying they had a very positive view of it. For more going on in the Bay State, here's Ron Marshalsea with our Massachusetts Report.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. On Monday, UMass Amherst and WCVB published a poll saying that 61% of Bay Staters had a favorable view of cannabis legalization. The Massachusetts Cannabis Commission announced earlier this month that the state had sold $2.3 billion worth of cannabis in the first 3 years since the first adult use dispensaries opened on November 20th, 2018. Commission Chairman Stephen Huffman said that the poll shows that legalization is reducing the stigma historically associated with cannabis. This will only enable the Commission to continue making headway on efforts to ensure full participation in this industry by disproportionately harmed communities. The state's adult use cannabis sector employs more than 17,000 employees, while medical cannabis employs about 8,800. Legalization campaigns are usually accompanied by the simple idea of regulate marijuana like alcohol, yet this hasn't been the case, especially in Massachusetts. The plant is already taxed at 10.75%, while the beer tax is less than 1%, and now state legislators in Boston want further restrictions on weed. One active bill would limit flower and concentrates to no more than 10% THC, and another would increase the legal age for cannabis, but not alcohol, from 21 to 25. Peter Bernard, the executive director of the Massachusetts Grower Advocacy Council, is attempting to file his own bill in the state legislature that will make alcohol regulated the way marijuana is. Bernard added that his point isn't to get his bill passed, it's mainly to make the obvious visible to his state's legislators that cannabis isn't the substance that needs tighter restrictions. And finally, another cannabis retailer is suing the city it resides in, this time in Gloucester, Massachusetts. The owner of Happy Valley is suing the city of Gloucester over community impact fees that the company says are excessive and bad for business. The suit is asking the city to give back nearly $500,000 in fees. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
And if you're in Massachusetts next week, namely Boston, Sensi Mag is hosting an event at the House of Blues. The pandemic obviously took a huge toll on the ability for cannabis lovers to gather together. So Sensi Mag is celebrating the start of a new year and sense of the world as we go into the holiday season.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, in-person events, obviously we've been starved of them for the past, 18 months or so. And we've been doing a lot of these kind of digital Zoom calls, but getting together in person, obviously just creates that sense of community that Sensi's all about. That's really at the core of our business, is building community. So that face, be at the House of Blues in Boston. The foundation room is the second floor there of the House of Blues. They have a really nice, elegant setting. A fireplace is going to be going. We'll have a DJ spinning vinyl records. We'll have a live painter there, so some entertainment, some food, and obviously some great people for some cannabis networking. It's going to be probably about 150 people in attendance is what we're expecting. So, not the smallest event we've done, but also not the biggest.
Tickets for the event are available through Ticketmaster, and you can find more information on Sensi's website, sensimag.com. Leaders of Germany's incoming governing parties announced they have a formal agreement to legalize marijuana in the country. They will also focus on promoting broader drug policy harm reduction measures when they take power. And the government of Malawi has asked the former world heavyweight champ Mike Tyson to become the official ambassador for the country's cannabis industry, proving it really is a whole new world of weed out there. As always, remember to use it responsibly. For now, I'm Elena Pinto for Weed Talk News and Pro Cannabis Media. See you next time.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.